Yeah.
I felt
Don't go on Sunday or Saturday. That's when we go.
Really? Sunday is the best time to go here in Orem. No one goes to Costco on Sunday here. Is there like a sporting section? Because they don't have much of a sporting section in Orem. Everything.
Yeah.
They have a pretty extensive meat section, it sounds like. I couldn't find skirt steak in the Orem Costco. I'm like, dude, I just want skirt steak, nothing crazy.
I think we're gonna take fan.
Good.
We'll wait till Christmas trees are up, we'll take it up front.
Go to the photo place and develop all the copies.
Yeah.
I would trust you. Right. So if you don't want to do
You have stains, you have red,
Well, I have the special packages for everything you wash in.
You guys are wearing.
well, there are things that do not go to the dryer.
Yeah,
That's
that's
done
done.
concept of that at all. So if I'm gonna be gone
It's
for
all-
a weekend, when all our work is done, all of the things that do not go in the dryer, I have. Probably that's not washed.
Turns everything perfect. I'm like,
Even when I was sick, it's like,
I'm like, it's all you for.
yeah,
Oops, no, she does that.
You guys want some drinks?
you don't do the bathroom.
I just. Malia, you need to be a panelist.
Your whole marriage, like,
She divided like a thousand times, you know, she went back and forth, like when she was really busy. Teaching as a student, I did a lot more, so it's changed. But, yeah, we. Send the, what we have. Hey Scott.
How you doing?
Rudy.
I haven't heard groovy for a while, but that's a good.
How are you?
seriously, Google thing, the world's largest Costco is in Salt Lake City.
I did. You got it, though.
You're
It's very
the world's
fun.
largest Costco, is located in Salt Lake City,
It's
Utah.
very fun.
And one in Brick,
No, it's further. Salt Lake, it's further. It's the best.
235,000 square feet. It's also a Costco business center, offering a wider range of products, being hired to businesses. Well, a new larger Costco is proposed for President California, which has not yet been built. You gotta go there, I guess, while it's still the largest Costco.
when are we gonna be done today? Is there time to make it? That's all field trip, we know.
Have we been on 7:30?
You guys share, called me like it's 69.
Before we do the budget. That
Yes.
was cut out all the time.
I'm down.
There's no legal or statutory reason why we should not. Let's just do the budget for whatever else. Please nominate the Costco.
There's actually possible.
It's gonna be second place, so.
Scott, you need to get on that. You need to have the largest Costco. Why is that here in Provo?
It's a great question.
That would bring in some sales.
That we would be,
That will be equal all the other sales.
yeah, probably.
You know, the West Side would have no reason to complain if we had the largest freaking Costco in the nation.
Happiness would be everywhere.
No, you can.
Something both conversation. But when you have a chance, you don't have over and you know you do just need to be made. But well,
Isaac, how you doing? Brian? Greg? How you doing? That's why we invited Brian. We don't need your jurisprudence here. He just says it, you know.
Lockheed humor is a big fan.
Are you a Brian Regan fan? Remember that is? So it's, our justice court judge, his name is Steve, and Obviously, we're doing our regulations, that's the subject. You know,
Right, oh.
So good. So good. How are you? Back's all. Yeah. Well, for here. Well, you know what, I'll sit over here. I'll sit over here because George is in here today. He's Shaw's. Yeah, let's see. And then you see you can move down there.
Oh, are we recognizing out?
Is that like?
Recording in progress.
The radio. Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, June 17th, 1:30 p.m. And we'll call the meeting to order. And we'll do a quick roll call here, beginning with Councilor McKay,
Councilor McKay?
Craig Christensen, Gary Garrett,
Rachel Whipple.
Becky Bogdan?
and Travis Hoban is planning to join us online for the via Zoom for the work session. Okay. And George will be in and out also. Both this afternoon and tonight. Travis will be here in person for the council meeting. Welcome to the administration. So, I'm sorry, Kevin, what?
We just got Gordon Hannon.
He's on?
Yeah.
Oh, welcome, George. It's midnight there, but welcome. I think it's only 10 o'clock. Making the feel good. It's proposed that we approve the work meeting minutes from June 3rd. Does anyone have any comments or corrections that they'd like to request? If not, I will declare the minutes approved by unanimous consent. Our first item is an ordinance amending Provo City Code regarding covered parking structures on historic landmark properties. This will be presented by one of our planners, Dustin Wright.
All right, thank you. So this item is one that an applicant has submitted to the city to have you consider this evening. It's a citywide impact, as all text amendments are, but it's really applicable to properties that are on the historic landmarks register and are in an area that allows for accessory dwelling units. So it kind of narrows down the scope of where this will be applied to. As you know, in the ADU areas, there's requirements that have to be met for one to be established. One of those is that there's 4 parking spaces required. There's a provision in the code that allows for parking to be counted on the driveway if that leads to required covered parking. So properties that don't have covered parking that wanted to take advantage of that would have to provide covered parking to be able to count spaces on the driveway towards that minimum requirement. And that's kind of the issue that the applicant has run into. She has a property that's on the historic landmarks register, but she'd like to do an ADU on that property. Currently, there's not a covered parking garage or carport on the property. And so she was looking to do one. We also pointed out that adding structures onto a landmark property isn't the best way to go. That changes the character of the historic building. entrance, that would be something they'd have to look at, to make sure it's appropriate for that. So I would go to the Landmarks Commission and they'd make that determination.
So Landmarks Commission doesn't care about the inside of a property, they only care about the outside look of it?
I'm sure that they care about it. It's just our code only requires that the exterior maintains that historic.
Cause even when I Googled it, they said a real life historic property is inside and outside. It's not just the outside
Yeah.
exterior.
Yeah,
It's
as
also
far as-
maintaining the inside look and character of the building.
Yeah, as far as our Title 16 goes for landmarks, it only protects the exterior, not the interior. So in this situation, yeah, an ADU is a permitted use in certain areas, and so they could pursue it. It's just, in this case, adding something on the exterior, like a carport or a garage, would significantly alter that character. And so that's what we're trying to find a way to let them be able to move forward with that same land use that other neighbors around them have, but to also protect the historic character as well at the same time.
You raise a good point, Becky. I've been through some historic homes, most probably have, here downtown. They try to feature some every year during the Freedom Festival. The one on Fifth West, owned by Dr. Markham, a beautiful historic home. We went in and it's true to the history for the first half, but then they say from here back, this is all an addition. We've added on, you know, all of the family room and so on. So it still looks historic from the front. But yeah, they will sometimes remodel and refurbish on the inside and in the back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of these big old places were essentially used as boarding houses, or you had multiple families. They didn't all have their separate kitchens and bathrooms, but these buildings have been through lots of different kinds of uses and densities of people living inside them. It's kind of cool.
I'm against it because I think historic is historic. So I think if you're gonna renovate and make it modern, then make it modern and put on a garage, right? If you're going to, because obviously if they had the back half, they had to add it on. So it's modern and should be up to code. But if you're going to have a historic home, to me, it should be a historic home. If you wanted a modern home with half of it modern, half of it historic, props, let's bring it up to code.
Yeah, so the goal with this is to keep a historic home looking the same and not have it change. That's why we're bringing this forward, so that they're able to continue with, you know, adapting uses to keep it financially viable to keep these historic homes. So having an ADU in one is a good example of that. And so we're trying to help them over a hurdle to be able to have something like that, to be able to keep the exterior looking exactly as it has, while still providing an option for them to be able to apply that ADU on the inside. So that's what this is looking at doing. So this slide here shows kind of what we've worked out with the applicant. And then any text amendment we get, we bring it through our legal department, have them take a look at it as well. And so this slide here shows some changes that we've gotten back feedback to help bring it up to some of the state legislature changes have affected, for example, tandem parking spaces. So we've taken out some language there to help align that with some state codes that have recently changed, and just help clarify some things, make it easier to understand and things like that. So that's this version here. And then here's a slide just showing the two. So I've sent that on to the applicant this morning, haven't heard back from her, but she was good with the first changes that we came with, and nothing in the second one changes what she's trying to do. She'll still be able to do that. It just helps us keep up with the state code and have more clarity. I don't know if Brian has anything additional there, but.
Yeah, I had sent out an email about this, just, letting you know that I thought some of the language from the first one was not as precise as I would have liked. So we came up with the second suggested one, but I don't know that I have anything more to say about it, but I'm happy to answer any questions if there were questions about the revisions.
Nope.
So the state only makes 2 tandem parking spaces
No,
required, or?
the issue is that there was a new bill passed this year. It's the same bill that said that we can't regulate garage sizes, that we can't require garages to be more than 10 by 10 or 10 by 20. That same bill also has a provision in it, because what we have right now is we have provision in our code that says if you have a certain number of parking spaces that you want to count towards your required parking, you can count tandem spaces, but only if both spaces belong to the same unit. So if you've got an ADU, the way our code reads is, let's say you have a 2-car garage with 2 spaces behind it. The way our code currently reads, you can only count that as 4 parking spaces if one of the garage spaces and the driveway space behind it belong to the ADU, and the other garage space and the driveway space behind it belong to the house. The state has said we can't do that, that tandem spaces just count.
So it doesn't matter who has them, they just count.
They count as 4. If you have a 2-car driveway, 2-car garage with a 2-car driveway, it just counts as 4 spaces, no matter what.
Okay.
So.
And they have to work it out on their own of how they maneuver, and
We can't do anything about it.
we can just nix the parking on the street, and then they have to figure out how they have to rotate their cars.
And so to be clear, the change here in 5A is entirely about that bill. It has nothing to do with the applicant's proposal.
Okay,
Even if we don't pass it, even if we reject this proposal and don't do anything, the state law still trumps. There's actually at least 1, if not 2 other places in our code that say this same thing. And so our approach is we just know that we can't enforce that provision of city code. And while we're doing the zoning rewrite, it's one of the things on our list that we're going to fix anyway. This is an opportunity to just take advantage of it because we're already changing the exact same code. But there's no reason why you have to approve this just because that's in there. If the council rejects the applicant's application and these changes aren't made, it's not going to affect anything. Our code will have a provision in it that we can't enforce, and we'll take out during the rewrite. We won't enforce it in the meantime.
thanks, Brian.
Any other questions for Dustin? So this is on our agenda for tonight, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Dustin. Thanks, Dustin. Next, we have a presentation regarding fiscal year 26 tentative budget amendments presented by Andrea Wright, our budget analyst.
Kevin, could you pull up that PDF for me? Thank you. So these are the final changes to the tentative budget that was presented on May 6, 2025. We finally received the certified tax rates. So you'll see that that was the biggest effect in the general fund. And then there was also the increase of transfer that we received from the portion of the water rate increase that was added as well. And then there's the increase to the Justice Court payroll. So we actually receive those numbers from the state on what the judge can actually make. And so we received those after May 6th. Then we also received the certified tax rate for the library. It came in a little bit higher than we budgeted. And so Carla waited until those numbers actually came in to go ahead and make it so it was a balanced budget at the end. We discussed the rental rehab and CDBG and home changes last work meeting, and then water just reflects the utility rate increase that was motioned to include in the budget for tonight. And then energy is the same CIP that we discussed last work meeting that they made to it. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Andrea? Okay, that was easy. Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you tonight. Next, we have a discussion regarding neighborhood feedback about time-limited off-leash hours for dogs in city parks. Maria, thanks for taking the lead on this, and David.
Okay. So like we discussed in I think the March 10th, I'm not quite sure. On March work meeting, we discussed a proposed ordinance by Councilor Hanley and Christensen for off-leash hours in parks. Based on the discussion from that work meeting, there was a motion by council for council staff to go to all 5 neighborhood districts with a survey to receive input on if there's specific neighborhoods or specific districts that people felt that how they felt about off-leash hours in parks, or if they had suggestions for parks or any other comments. So we created a survey through Qualtrics. It's not a statistically valid survey. And we printed them out as well. We went to all 5 neighborhood districts. And there people are able to take it electronically and on paper. And then here's the feedback for you all. So I'm just going to walk through kind of quantitative data, and then David will walk through the qualitative aspect of this. Is it clicked on? There we go. So we had 349. There's actually more response. It was over 400, but we took out ones where people just clicked the first response, which was what district do you live in, and then they exited the survey because there was no responses there. So there is a number of those, but these are ones that they at least answered through the second question, which is, would you support off-leash hours in parks, yes or no? And then if they answered no and then didn't answer anything else, we counted that as a complete survey because they just don't want it. So that's their opinion. So those are counted as complete. So complete, we had 349 from the 5 districts, which we feel really good about, actually. So quantitative data. So based on 349, so no and yes, this is just the simple question of would you support it? And then we got into the more details. So this is just a very simple question, just the idea of that, yes or no, leans towards no.
Malia, I'm trying
Yeah.
to remember if at any point in the survey you ask the respondent if they own a dog.
We do not ask that.
Okay.
No.
Because I heard someone say at some point, some people who own dogs were not supportive of off-leash hours.
There were some dog owners that came up to us and said, I own a dog and I don't want to do this. And some said, I own a dog and please do this. So I don't know. We didn't track that.
Right. Okay.
It's just anecdotal.
Written comments. People said it, written comments.
Okay. That's maybe where
Yeah.
So we got some emails.
Could I ask a quick question?
Of course.
Hi, George. Welcome.
Hi, thanks. The wording on the graph says, would you support off-leash dog parks? But you just said the question was off-leash hours in parks. I just want to clarify if the language on the question specified that we were asking about off-leash hours, not off-leash parks.
Yes, we were asking about off-leash hours. That's just a shortened version for the slideshow.
Okay, thanks.
But the survey did say hours, and we can send that out. So here it is by district. All districts lean towards no. Again, not statistically valid, so anyway. The only district there's 2 districts that had more yeses than nos, which is 4 and 5. What time periods would you prefer? So we put a lot of time periods there, and then we also had another category. Those are reflected in the qualitative data that we have. Some people said you should do it during school hours, during the school year, so there's no kids at the parks. And some people said it should differ based on seasons of the year, like when there's in the winter have less, and summer have more. So in the qualitative data, there's some there. This one's hard to read on the slide here, but what parks in your district would you support having off-leash hours? So some people still put no parks when they answered no originally, which is reflected kind of the number there. The most one here, this just kind of shows all the parks that people suggested. Top 5 parks suggested for those that said they would support it and where they would support it. So here are those parks. And then we'll go to qualitative.
Right, so of those 350 in our final pool, we had about 200 comments. So what we did was we took all those comments and we coded them and identified the commonly recurring themes that we found from those comments. The first most commonly mentioned was safety concerns. We had 95 people that were worried about their safety, and 63 of them specifically mentioned their children. Some of those comments even reported that they have children that have previously been bitten by dogs in a park. The second most common was health and cleanliness, almost exclusively worries about dog poop in their parks. And then the third was owner responsibility. There were lots of mentions about irresponsible owners who let their dogs run wild. They say that their dogs are quote unquote good boys, and then next thing you know, they're in a fight with another dog or with a person. The next is a request for alternative solutions. The most frequent one that was mentioned was fenced in areas or some kind of enclosure in which dogs could be allowed to run free, or only certain parks. And like Malia mentioned, having different hours, very early in the morning or very late at night when the park is basically unoccupied. And then doubts about enforcement and regulation. We had 34 people make the claim that the rules that are already in place regarding dogs in parks are not enforced. That people already do this even though it's not legal. And then some of the other themes that we saw were impact on public spaces and non-dog owners. In particular, there was a lot of worries about dogs running out into the street, into traffic, or attacking runners or joggers who might be passing by. The freedom and the health that dogs enjoy by being able to run free and play. Use of public funding, access, meaning people who are don't have a dog park within a reasonable distance that they can drive to from their home. And yeah, that's all we've got for you. We'd be glad to answer any questions.
And one note about the qualitative data, it seems largely negative because most of the qualitative and comments we had were from people who said they did not support the idea. A lot of the people that did support the idea just didn't make any other comments. They just said, yeah, sounds good, here's times, and then that was the end of their survey. So if it seems leaning one way, it's because it is.
I was just curious if we had any update from Parks and Rec.
Yes, actually, and Parks and Rec is here as well, but they did a statistically valid survey with the consultant, if you remember, and they presented, I believe, to their Parks and Rec board, and they're finalizing kind of their final plans on what a dog park master plan would look like. And Doug is here, and I'll let him speak anymore or correct what he's saying, but.
And planning to present to the council soon.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to come and visit with you a little bit about this. We surely appreciate this effort that's been done to gain some public input. As part of our master planning study, we've also done some open houses as far as looking for, established dog parks. And James is working with our consultant. We just recently presented to the Parks and Recreation Board. They wanted a little extra time to get their feedback back to us. But we've got a narrowing group of locations that I think the consultants and staff are recommending, both established parks to create these dog parks, and then also some other areas that might not be established parks, that might be city land that could be utilized for such purpose. So we're pretty close. James, how soon do you think we can get back and present on that?
Our last meeting's in 3 weeks. Yeah, we wanted to present July or July.
Yeah, that was positions us so we can get the rest of it next fiscal year.
Well, I would sure like to hear that before we go through a lot of discussion and debate, because that would be a game changer for me. Right? Because I think all of us feel like the issue needs to be addressed. And addressing it that way, I think would be everyone's preference. So it sounds like there are solutions that you're feeling good about in terms of established dog parks. Right.
The timeline's part of the question on that.
So is that a motion?
Well, I was just throwing it out. I don't want to kill discussion if people feel like that we've already discussed it quite a bit. I'm wondering if we just continue this. So I'm just asking if there's
I would second you if you'd make a motion and
Okay.
just take it.
I'd make a motion that we continue this until after we get a chance to hear from Parks and Rec.
I would second that.
Okay, a motion by Councillor Christensen with a second by Councillor Bogdan. Any discussion?
Sorry, I'm not
Yes.
sure I could hear correctly what the timeline was for hearing from Parks and Rec.
And I'm not sure it was clear either, George. So did you say, Doug and James, that you expect to be ready on Tuesday, July 8th to present? Yeah. Okay, so 3 weeks, George, our next meeting.
And that's information about the proposed dog parks.
Yeah, it'd be the summary report of our dog park master plan and implementation study.
And you survey findings.
And survey findings, just the valid survey.
I mean, I don't have any problem waiting 3 weeks. I just never intended this to have anything but a sunset clause on it, because it seemed to me that we were looking mainly at interim help for opportunities for people before we have enough dog parks in the city to provide for our citizens who need those spaces. So, I mean, in some ways, as long as the timeline on the 1 year mark for the first park doesn't necessarily change, and even with one park, I'm not sure what that information does to change our discussion, but 3 weeks, of course, is not here nor there in terms of the timing on this. I'm just wondering about what we would hear in that meeting that would change this discussion. Maybe Craig can clarify what your thinking is.
Well, I think what we would hear is what the plan is. I too would prefer dedicated dog parks. That addresses the safety issues, that addresses, the citizens who have dogs. I think that's the right solution. So in 3 weeks, we'll get a chance to hear what the plan is and what that rollout looks like. And so after we hear that, either it's good or it's insufficient, but this may be a non-issue based on what they report. I think we've already been around the topic. I don't know that there's any new insights. Let's wait and see what Parks and Rec comes back with. That was the thinking. Any other discussion? Yes.
I was under the understanding that we were going to have this come back about the same time Parks and Rec was going to come back with a recommendation anyway. And I was assuming that it was supposed to be on the same day. So if it's just the next meeting, that's why I have no issue with it. We need to look at the big picture. Not necessarily just the results that we got from the survey.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else? All right, we'll call for a vote on the motion. Councillor McKay?
Sorry.
Yes, Councillor Hanley.
I'm ready to vote, but I just wanted to make one comment about the survey. I thought it was very helpful, and I'm really grateful to staff for working on that. It's obviously very divided feedback, which I kind of expected. And I remain hopeful that something like this actually addresses, both sides simultaneously, because I do think we've got evidence that dogs off leashes are still posing dangers to people, even with our current policies. And I'm hopeful that maybe some sort of interim off-leash hours helps to concentrate those needs at certain times of the day that are safer for the rest of the citizens. But that's how I read the data and what I thought was helpful about it. So I appreciate that.
Thanks, Councillor Hanley. Equally, I agree. I thought the data would be more even, that people given options for hours would be willing to show more, and not all parks, but some parks, there'd be more willingness to compromise. So we'll see what the Parks and Rec Department has to add to this report. Councillor Bogdan.
And just to reply to George's comment, I worry about having an interim solution, right? Because we're sending a message to the public. It's okay to do this, but once we get to dog parks, it's not okay to do this. It's like telling my autistic son or even any of my regular kids, we're sending mixed messages to me. To me, it's like, if we don't want them in regular parks, let's not even do an interim. Let's just wait until we have a dog park and let them go wild. Because we're just sending mixed messages and confusion, in my opinion.
Thanks. Councillor Bogdan.
I have a quick question. So when we were doing this survey on these districts, were these neighborhood districts or were these our council voting districts?
Neighborhood districts.
Okay. And then for the parks, yours was the council voting districts. So it's slightly different data sets.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Good point.
Thank you.
All right. Well, yes, Councillor McKay.
I know just in the last couple of weeks, I had a dear neighbor who was walking his dog without a leash, which he does all the time. And this dog's very good. Watch it every day out the window. And it got hit by a car. And that was tragic, very upset for him. He lost his wife and his son already this year. Now he lost his best friend. He was a friend dog. And so, it's both for humans and dogs, in my opinion. And then this week, a young woman got bit. Walking on the street with an off-leash dog too. And the problem is it happens all the time, but people don't want to say anything. They don't want to report it. They don't want to create issues in their ward or their community or their neighborhood. They don't want to offend anyone. They don't want to get the dog killed. So these things aren't reported. Like even us going off the police stats, my last time, and there were some on the police stats, but that's not really truly representative of what actually goes on in our city.
Yeah, a fairly limited sample size.
But people just don't report it.
She's right.
Okay, we'll call for a vote then on this motion to delay action on this report until we get the Parks and Rec report in 3 weeks. Councillor McKay.
Yes.
Councillor Christensen.
Yes.
Councillor Garrett. Yes. Councillor Whipple.
Yes.
Councillor Bogdan.
Yes.
Councillor Hanley.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes 6-0 with Councillor Oben excused. We have a scheduled break on the agenda for 5 minutes before we begin a 60-minute discussion on business license rental dwelling fees. And then there's another break after that. We can continue, we can keep going with the next item and then break in about an hour. Do people need a break?
I always like breaks.
To get.
Customer service is got it, so, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't see that.
Just stay on schedule. Yeah.
Okay.
Scheduled in.
Myself, everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll now take a break. Now to break.
World's largest, burger.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
We'll reconvene our work session and next move to a presentation regarding the 2025 business license and rental dwelling fee schedule presented to us by Laramie Gonzalez from one of our analysts from customer operations. And is it Aaron? Oh, and Aaron Sanborn, Vice President of Zion's Public Finance. Who's first? Welcome, Laramie.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Laramie Gonzalez, and I'm excited to finally have the opportunity to bring to you our licensing fee analysis. I know it's been a long time coming, and I think we finally got it to a point where we can share with you some good information on what we're doing today as far as the fees we're imposing and what they're covering, and more specifically what they're not covering to move forward. So I thought I'd give you a quick history of how we got to where we are today. Every year during budget preparation time, we always get hit with those questions on what are our revenues? Are they adequate? Or what are our fees? Are they covering what it costs to do business? And we ask ourselves those questions every single year. I think we're pretty aware, I think everyone is, that for the longest time, that really hasn't been the case when it comes to licensing. But this year, we actually thought they've not been updated for a long time, and we're getting those extra questions from the administration and from council and from a variety of others. So we asked for to go out and get a study done with regards to our licensing fees. And so about a year ago, in May of last year, we went out, we contracted with Zion's Public Finance to do this study for us. And just a side note, we have had a previous study done, and that previous study was done about 15 years ago. And it started with another consultant and ended up with Zion's at the end of the day, about a year later. And kind of interesting, they came up with the same kind of consensus that I think you're going to see in today's presentation of the analysis that was just done. So I thought that was kind of interesting that it's not groundbreaking. It's kind of stuff that we already knew was going to be in there. But the other interesting part of this was clear back at that time, it was revealed that the fees that we charged for the services wasn't covering the cost of doing business at that time. And so ironically, none of the fees were increased, and actually some of them decreased. So
there you go.
I don't really have a great answer as to why, but that's just interesting tidbit there. Well, what's kind of funny about that is over time you do get more efficient because you have better programs and you have better ways of doing things that kind of make things more smooth, like with online applications and things like that. But also over time, things do become more expensive, just cost of business, wages, everything else does go up. So kind of at the end of the day, you're a little more efficient. It does cost a lot more to do things today than it did 15 years ago. So you'll kind of see in the study that it's not a whole lot different than what was actually proposed in 2011. So I mentioned we contracted with Zion's Public Finance. Aaron Sanborn is a Vice President of Zion's Public Finance. He's here today. So he's going to go through the study itself and kind of go through every bit of the study, the findings, how the methodology they use to come up with the different things in the study. And then when he's done speaking, I have a couple slides that just kind of summarize some highlights of where we're at, like the revenues and what's could change if we adopt what's being proposed, and then give some staff recommendations. Then we'll go from there.
So Laramie, we know when the last study was done in 2011, we know the outcome was not to increase fees. Do we know previous to that, when the last time was that fees were increased, previous to 2011?
I do not know. So last time I looked, I went back, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years, and a couple of fees did change, but the fee structure itself, nothing changed.
Yeah,
So
Okay.
we're probably going on, I would assume, close to 20 years of the same fee structure that we
Okay.
have today.
So other than just not wanting to raise rates, was there any reason the council gave in 11 why they didn't raise them at all? Anything other than just, I just don't want
I
to.
have no idea. In fact, we have a copy of the council presentation when it was presented back in 2011. And I think the second to the last slide says consensus is everybody agrees that we should raise those fees and we should do it over maybe a 3-year time period. And the next bullet point says no fees, no rates changed. So I'm not sure what happened.
Just a really indecisive council, huh?
I was gonna say, having been here at the time, I can say there was there was comprehensive public comment from business owners in opposed to the increases.
Oh, okay.
So that I think was probably the reason.
And you'll see once Aaron goes through the study this time, that there are some things in there that will change, that will dramatically affect some business owners and or rental dwelling license holders. But for the most part, it'll affect a small few. And it's simply because the way that the rate structure by which we'll impose those fees going forward changes. Because right now for example, business licensing, we assess those fees based on number of employees. And the proposal is to abandon that and go to the business classification type instead of the amount of employees, because that model has proven not to really be even defensible as far as having two businesses doing the same thing, producing the same amount of widgets, if you'll say, and one might have 5 employees, might one have 100, but the revenues or the gross, I guess you'd call them revenues for that business might be the same. So the proposal will be to change the fee structure. And so that might be a little bit different for some. And when it comes to rental dwelling licenses, you'll see again, and we'll summarize this at the end. It doesn't make sense to charge for one or charge for more than one. So it'll change depending on how many you have going forward. And then we roll in the disproportionate fee, and that'll all make so much more sense after Aaron gets done talking. And then I'll summarize that when he's done. So Aaron, if you will.
Yep.
Scroll to whatever page you want.
Okay, sounds good. Well, council, it's great to be with you today. As Larry said, my name is Aaron Sanborn with Zions Public Finance, and this has been, a fun project for us and for me, particularly as a resident of Provo. To finally work on a project for where I live was great. General overview when it comes to business license fees. The state code generally talks about a few different categories that we can charge businesses. Obviously, there's the base administrative costs, the time that it takes the city in order to process and to approve the licenses. There's also categories for what's called disproportionate fees, where if you are disproportionately impacting the city more for certain services than your traditional single family residents, then you can charge a disproportionate fee on those businesses for services like police, fire, there's garbage, there's traffic, there's different categories you can charge for. As well, you can charge if there are certain regulatory inspections or requirements that have to be met by certain businesses. You can make the business accrue the cost for what it takes to do that inspection, whatever that may be. And the final category is if there's an enhanced service provided to a certain business group or business area. For example, if in the downtown area there was enhanced city garbage pickup that was more than above in other areas, you could include that in there as well. This analysis, this study specifically looks at the base business license fee and then the disproportionate cost on both business licenses and also rental dwelling licenses. Then if you want to just go to page 3, we'll just start there. One of the first things that we're doing is we're looking at what are the costs to the city, and identifying both that from the direct wage and benefit cost to the city, but also different things like overhead, because there are a number of departments in the city that every employee benefits from that licensing doesn't have to have on their own, whether that's IT or cybersecurity, just different things that are included there. So we can scroll down to the next page with this. We look at these overhead costs, and this is based on the 2024 budget, looking at the departments that, again, provide a general benefit to employees in the city that we can spread the cost around. And it does include a number of different departments. These are the ones that we have generally seen in other cities as far as what they include in these costs. And overall, you can see the calculation there. We want to get down to, for everything, what we're doing is getting down to a cost per minute that it takes to provide that service. And for the overhead departments, it worked out to be 14 cents per minute. Now, that gets filed away to come back. But again, this is to say businesses and rental dwelling license holders are benefiting from the services that these departments provide. And according to the state code, these can be included in the cost that it takes for the business licenses. And then on the next page, but as we talked with Laramie, with the customer service department, we realized that there were some costs that weren't completely being captured when it came to the customer service department, where it's not necessarily people who are approving a license, but it's employees who are answering calls from businesses. There's about 4% of the calls that come into that to customer service are about licensing. And so there's an amount for the call center budget that can be included in the study as well. You can see that $49,000 about, and then that gets broken out per license that is issued to be $7.32 per license that gets totaled in. And these are kind of the initial costs we look at. Then the next biggest category is the actual labor costs that it goes per employee. And we can skip over a number of these pages and get down to page 6 on there where it talks about the minutes spent. Yeah, right there. I'll just spend a moment here. There's a lot of information on these next couple of pages when it comes to this, but what we did is we worked with customer service to identify every single employee at the city who in any way has any part to approve a license, whether that's customer service, whether that's the police department for reviews, fire, development services, any employee who has to do something to get a license approved. We wanted to know how long do they spend on average to do their process. And that you can see kind of in those few tables, that's how long they spend. So kind of getting back to the idea that we're trying to identify the true cost of service. Yeah.
Yeah, so when I was reading this, I was wondering why we have development services on there twice. It's probably two different things, but
yeah, it's a great question.
Identified.
Yeah, so it's different employees. The information that we were given listed out, this employee name for that, and rather than include the employee names and as they may be changing out, but the position and that title would still be remaining. So if there's a duplicate, it's just because there are two different people in development services who are doing something with the application. Great question. And that goes through both for the general business licenses, the home-based business licenses, beer licenses, nonprofit, all those different ones, the number of minutes that it takes to process a license. Then on page number, yes, it's not on the PDF, but page 8, it talks about the indirect training cost per hour. As well, we know as a part of the process of licensing, there are trainings that the employees go through in order to stay proficient on their jobs. This is also customer service help training other members of the city on the licensing process. And those costs can be included as well. It doesn't amount to a whole lot in there, but again, this is showing the true cost to the city to provide those licenses. That bottom table starts to go into what we're talking about, this total cost per minute. We're taking the wages and benefits for all those employees, building in that overhead amount of those general service departments that provide the benefit to all employees, as well as the training costs, and then specific supplies for licensing to build out this total cost per minute. And that ranges, based on the employee. Everyone that touches the license, we want to calculate that out for. Then the next step obviously is just to take the time that was spent on it, multiply it by that cost per minute to come up with the calculated fee. And table 14 on the next page starts to go through that. And I want to kind of spend a moment here because Laramie talked about this, but I want to kind of highlight it more. The current fee structure does break things out based on the number of employees for a business. And as Laramie mentioned, there really isn't a good justification for doing that because you could have two businesses who are providing the exact same service at the same level, the same impact to the city, but just because one has more employees, they're charged more. And so we are seeing this model of charging per employee is starting to go away, being replaced for kind of this true cost model. And that table kind of calculates things out. So you can see, obviously, some of those fees are going up, but some of them as well are going down just based on the true cost to provide service. Yeah.
So you talked about also the traffic that it generates. So even though we have some public transportation here in Provo, we don't have a whole lot. Wouldn't a business with 101 employees attract more traffic than 11 to 25?
It depends on the business, because you could have a small manufacturing company who has constant deliveries, constant trucks coming in and out, and even so they have 11 employees, but maybe they have a higher traffic impact than a larger business. And so in theory, you could have a smaller business have less of a traffic impact, but the same token, there could be an instance where a smaller business has just the same kind of impact, maybe a different kind of traffic, but still has a pretty large impact on the traffic.
So where did you include the traffic impacts at?
So
It's not per employee, where would it be?
Yeah, so this study just looks at specifically police and fire as far as the additional impacts. Traffic wasn't one we wanted to delve into with this one. It's one of the areas that I have seen in one city comes to mind, I believe North Logan. Not North Logan. Marriott Slaterville is the only one that I'm aware of that does have a traffic kind of component built into the license fee. But in discussions with kind of licensing, they want to focus on just the police and the fire as far as the service impact.
I'd also suggest that the businesses in Provo are subject to the transportation utility fee, so I think in some ways that would be duplicative if we put it into the licensing fee as well.
Yeah, that's a great point with that as well. So then one of the things you can see with the general business license, what we did is took the average of all the different license categories to come up with the maximum base fee of just about $252 for the general business license fee. And one thing that code is clear on, both for business licenses but also for rental dwelling licenses, is that the level at which the business license fees are set is obviously a policy decision up to the city council to determine that. And so it just means that you can't exceed what this calculated amount would be. So that gives us kind of the base license fee. That is just the cost that it takes to actually issue a license. But there is that additional element where certain businesses may have a more detrimental impact to the city services than a traditional single-family home. That's where we come into this disproportionate analysis. And again, this one just looks at police and fire services. And those are the two most common that we see in other cities as well. On page number 11, it talks about the calls for service. And so what we did is we worked with the police and fire department to gather all their calls for service across the city for a period of 1 year. And then we mapped those out to identify, did a call occur at a business location, residential location, at a rental location? and to identify where those are happening, to figure out and calculate, is each business category providing or impacting the city more or less than a single family home. And you can see the numbers there, but also embedded in this is the idea that there is a cost per call that it takes to provide service for each one of those calls. And this, the thinking behind this and what we do with this is that we take the police department, fire department budgets and identify how much time they are spending actively responding to a call. And we worked with those departments and they were able to calculate out how much time those that they spent responding to the calls. And so you can see 20% of the budget for police and fire are what we are including in table 16 to be able to identify this is the amount of time that is specifically spent on this and is allowed to be allocated to the businesses. Coming up with that total cost per call for police, a little over $410 per call, and fire department a little bit under $380 per call. And as I said, we mapped out all the different business categories, and I believe right now there's around 70 or so subcategories for business licenses. It starts here on the bottom of this page, it goes into the next one as well. And this is where the businesses are being classified. Yeah.
So I was curious as to why accommodation and food services are together. It's like hotels and restaurants.
Yeah, so these are based, and Larry, you can correct me if I'm wrong, these are based off of NAICS code classifications. As the businesses come in, they identify, hey, we are this kind of a business, and these fall in line with the federal NAICS codes that businesses are able to be grouped under.
Yeah, because when we had the information earlier in this presentation with the other cities, sometimes they had motels and restaurants. Those things were separate categories for other cities.
Yep, and every city will do the licensing completely different. And so we'll get to this a little bit later, that it's sometimes hard to make a direct comparison between one city to the other because there's not a mandated way to do the business licenses. There are some parameters from the state, but it really is up to what makes most sense for each individual city. And this is the way that Provo has decided kind of makes sense to categorize the businesses.
I can just add to that. Our current structure of how we charge those fees is again based on employee count. So when an applicant applies for those business licenses, they choose their own classification. And previously, historically, it's not been that big a deal for us to go back and police those. We do correct those when it's pretty obvious when it says Motel 6. We go to motel, it's not a restaurant. But for the most part, they choose that classification, we process that going forward. I think if we change to the proposed structure going forward, as far as going back to the classification, that classification is going to make much more sense and be a lot more critical to the accuracy of what that business type is. But previously, that's not been something that we have policed because it's not been part of what determines that fee structure going forward. So.
Yeah. Well, the reason I was curious about it is I know for some of our motels, we have lots of police calls going out to those. And so we do have a very high impact. Those should have a higher fee based on that. But if you've got a little restaurant that doesn't have any problems and it's in that same category, it seems like it would get a higher fee because it's lumped in with crappy hotels. Is that what would happen?
Yeah, I mean, in theory, yeah, this is based on how the businesses are classified and grouped. And so there is flexibility to reclassify businesses and to, make sure that they are fitting within an accurate category. This is just kind of based on the categories as they exist today, that we're looking at for this. But certainly, we do see business or cities will reclassify businesses because they are seeing an impact where, hey, and what we see a lot as well is with big box stores. Walmart is going to have so many more calls for service than a much smaller kind of general retail store. And so some cities will actually break out their retail by square footage to say, if you are 40,000 square feet or above, you have this license fee because we know, and we've shown, you have a higher impact. And so you can kind of rearrange the categories to make sure you're grouping similar businesses together. Because that's the idea, is ultimately you're trying to have similar businesses treated the same.
So do we do that now, or can we just do that without a study?
Well, you can split them without the study, but it might, so the study determines the fees, right? So the study is the data that we have, and if they were grouped in the past when we did the study, then maybe we don't have data to support changing the fees. But if you suspect that there is in fact a difference, we can split them now, give them the same fee, and then going forward, they would be tracked separately. And so then the data might support changing the fees in the future. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely accurate. Yeah.
So that's something you're interested in doing?
Well, I just didn't know, because maybe you get more fire calls to restaurants. And so maybe it does balance out. I don't know. And that's why I was curious with these being in the same pot.
Yeah.
One more comment, that I think a good example might be when we look at a gas station that applied for a business license. That gas station, it makes a difference if that gas station actually starts selling alcohol. So before, we would just have a gas station apply for a commercial business license for a gas station. I think going forward, it might be more important that if we now have a full service gas station that sells, because there are convenience stores that, for example, I think the old 7-Elevens used to sell gas, and now they don't sell gas. They're a convenience store on the corner, and they don't even sell alcohol. And now some of those actually apply for a beer license, and we consider that when they apply for the beer license, but not at the time that they're actually applying for just a regular gas station. So I think those little nuances do make a difference, and they will really going forward. But in the past, there was no way to really catch that if they weren't applying for a beer license at that time.
But now we have that, in this study, we have that, those classifications separated.
And you can see those, especially when it comes to the disproportionate fee analysis, you can see those different classifications.
But you're not worried about a motel and a restaurant being in the same classification?
Well, we would, yes. But that's just something we're gonna have to feel our way through as we get those licenses that come in, and they apply for those, and we can make sure they have the right max code.
Yeah, I was also going to add, this is probably way too early to be saying this, but we just had a meeting earlier this week where we talked about whether there was a need to add a new chapter to Title VI about specific motel and hotel regulations. And I think that's actually something that's probably likely to happen later in the fall, which would probably lead to what you're talking about just happening naturally. Because once we imposed new regulations, they would have to, their business licenses would need to be tracked separately.
One more, just as a follow-up to what Laramie said. So if you've got a gas station that sells alcohol, it has to get a business permit that says gas station with alcohol. Does it then also have to get a beer license too? And that's not considered double feeing them?
Well, a good question. And I don't know if Amanda or Laramie wants to, I mean, our beer license, I don't know what we charge for that, but the beer license, I think the answer to your question is no, for this reason, because we're charging them one fee for the business license based on processing the business license. We're charging them another fee for the beer license based on processing the beer license. On top of that, the disproportionate fee is about their calls for service based on their category. So all three of those things are separate and independent.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of goes to as well how we figure out the total cost per business, because there are kind of different buckets that you're being charged for that. With the table, you can see obviously here the gasoline stations with and without alcohol licenses. To explain kind of what this table is showing, each business category is showing how many businesses are currently, when we did the study, how many businesses are in that category, then how many police calls occur per business, how many fire calls occur per business, and then this final ratio for both police and fire. What we do is we calculated the ratio of how many calls the average residential unit, just kind of single family, gets in the city, and then we say that's our base. That is what everyone, business or home alike, kind of gets that same level there, and so we subtract that out from those different business categories to say how much above the average home are you creating an impact? If you see a ratio that is 0 or negative, then for that category, they either have no impact above that single family home, or actually have less of an impact on the city than the average single family residence. If they have a positive ratio, then obviously that means that they do have a disproportionate impact on those city services. And it does range based on the business category. You can see certainly some of them have a much higher impact on city services than others. So then finally, kind of on page 13 of this, it goes over the total calculated disproportionate cost. We did remove out any category that did not have a disproportionate impact, just to make it easier to look through. These are what the fees these businesses would be charged with their annual business license renewal based for the disproportionate fee. And again, this is separate from their regular processing fee to get the license. This is based on their impact, their calls for service. And then the total fee calculation on page 14, again, goes business by business to say, how much are you going to be charged for your just base license fee? What is that cost? And then how much of a disproportionate cost do you have to come up with the total cost per license? And again, this is just showing each of the subcategories. Obviously, there are more licenses than these, but since this is kind of showing the total disproportionate cost, we want to show that there. Really briefly, we did look at kind of the revenue projections for this, and they're on page 16. Currently, the city receives about $500,000 annually in business license fee revenue. If we were to look at the licenses that were in operation, and we did the study and applied this new fee structure, just the base fee only. If we say we only want to charge the base fee, the revenue would have been just over $640,000. And if both the base fee and disproportionate fee were included in that, the revenue would have been close to $970,000. So you can see a pretty sizable jump there in that. And one of the questions that we got in this process is, well, how does this compare to other cities? And again, like I mentioned, it is hard to completely compare apples to apples, but before coming to Zions, I worked for Eagle Mountain City doing economic development, and I heard a lot about the cost of business in one city versus the other. And certainly it's an important thing for businesses to know how much the cost of business is going to be. And so we did look at a number of comparable cities to see what their current business license fees look like. Out of those cities, right now, the only one that has a disproportionate fee and a base license fee is the city of Orem. And so we looked at Vineyard, Lehigh, Springville, American Fork as well. But all of those cities right now just have a base license fee. They don't charge disproportionate. We are seeing many cities change to a disproportionate fee model because it's the recognition that there is an impact that right now the businesses aren't paying for themselves. And so there is a lot more movement towards this disproportionate fee. Spanish Fork, I believe as well, is just based off of just a base business license fee. Off the top of my head, that's what I remember looking at theirs. So what we wanted to do and this is showing on page 22, we took just a couple of different kind of general businesses that might be located here in Provo or in Orem and say, what would the license fee be if you were to come to Orem or come to Provo? And as you can see, there's not one that is all better or all worse. It depends on the category. Some things are going to be more expensive, some are going to be less. And again, this goes back to, it really depends on what level of service you are providing in your community that makes up a lot of that difference. Or it may be that one city's licensing process has to go through more steps because of different inspections or different things that are required. And so even though it's hard, to completely compare apples to apples, this does show these aren't out of the ordinary. These aren't really kind of an outlier as far as what we see from business license fees. As a comparison, there's a chart on the next page. The average of the groups that we looked at was about $247 for a business license fee. Provo was slightly above that, but not the highest by any means. And so that's
When was Orm study done? Is it outdated?
Orms was done, it was done by Zions, but it's been probably about 5 to 7 years since they did theirs,
So if they did a newer one, their fees would probably go up.
I would imagine that, yeah, their fees would go up if they were to do one again. So that's the business license fee component. We also looked at the rental dwelling licenses. It follows along, honestly, a very similar process. Yeah.
Before we shift to that,
Sure thing.
I was hoping there was going to be more detail in this report. I'm just kidding. BF Skinner would be proud. Is this a typical rigor? More than typical? I've never actually seen one of these reports, and I'm sure I'll be hearing from the business community. I just love a sense of how this fits in with what most cities are looking at when they make this kind of decision.
Yeah, great question. This is kind of the exact process we go through, and this I think is a fairly rigorous analysis to go through.
Yeah.
Again, state code does not require a lot of justification for license fees. You know, as long as you're being reasonable, that's really the standard that the state code dictates. But we are well aware that anytime rates or fees are talked about, and especially increasing, that there is, you know, some scrutiny on that, and we want to make sure that everything we do is showing that it's justifiable and that it's defensible. And so this it's fairly rigorous, but this is what we do whenever we do a study. I don't say we've never been challenged on it, but certainly this is what we go through for everyone, again, to make it defensible and say, yes, these are actual costs that we're bearing. These aren't just, we're just guessing.
Yeah.
As to what it looks like.
I found it very helpful. I just didn't know if this was typical.
Yeah, I mean, we try to do this level of detail. We'll work in all of our studies to make sure that it is, again, defensible for you guys. And the same process holds true for the rental dwelling licenses. It's a very similar process. There are some nuances with this. And one thing I'll before I go, I'll pause really quickly and just say, home business licenses are one exception where, and this is noted in the report, that state code currently does not allow you to charge a license fee for a home-based business unless their impact is greater than just the typical residential use, or if they request a license. And so there is a fee calculated in there, but the recommendation kind of going forward is that, as continuing as is right now, those businesses wouldn't be charged a license fee. Just want to point that one out.
So would those typically be like the little dance studios that people have in their basements? Because people coming and going from 3 to 6, that's not a normal thing that you would see.
Yeah, so we see the spectrum from someone running an accounting business out of their home, or someone who does a dance studio or preschool. I think there are different classifications of a home-based business license, and so it's not necessarily ones that have more of an impact. I think they are still charged a fee, and when there is shown, hey, there is more than just someone working at their computer or things like that. So,
isn't it illegal to do like a dance studio? I know my friend got caught by Provo and she wasn't allowed to do a dance studio at her house. I mean, that's not even legal. So what?
No, Laura has
are legal.
So it depends on the number of employees that they have, depends on the number of trips, the potential trips of customers that are coming to and from the home. And of course, it's kind of like on your honor system. You do divulge that information when you make that application. So based on certain criteria, no, it's not required that you have and we can't charge for a business license, a home business license. Provo City Code does call it a home occupation permit. So it's a little bit different than a license. And we do have a large home occupation, major home occupation permit. And those are the ones that have a little bit more impact, that do happen in the home, that can have a larger impact. So, and we do require a license.
And is that your typical dance studios, and what does that include?
Again,
Daycare, preschool?
Depending on how many kids they have and how many people are coming to that location within an hour.
Okay, and some of these dance studios.
some of them could be a major. It's not likely that they're major. It's usually just a home business license. But again, It's not required that they have one. We, as a city, have always encouraged them to get one. It's much easier for us to track businesses in neighborhoods as far as if there's a zoning complaint, if there's parking issues, if there's other things that we need to follow up on, especially from the zoning perspective. If somebody calls, there's so many cars in front of my house, I can't find any parking. And we can't go there and enforce on anything that way when we don't know that there's a home occupation there, a home business. So if we know there's a home business there, and they've applied for one, we don't charge them for that. But at least we know, oh yeah, there's a reason why we need to fix it. And with that, on zoning, we go there and pay them for them and say, here's an issue we're having and can follow up on this thing. So it's mainly for our knowledge, it's for our best business practice to have an idea of what's out there and where it's at. So if we have an issue, we know who to contact, we know why it's happening.
Thank you. So if we could jump to, I think it's page 24, I just wanted, again, the process for this is very similar to the business license when it comes to the base cost of service. Looking at, again, the time that it takes, but with the rental dwelling license, there is kind of a difference with when it comes to the ones that have multiple units. That there is an additional kind of review, additional inspections that are required per unit. And so these ones, and you can see on it's the table 32 on page 25. Extra living space for elderly and their base rental dwelling license all have just kind of a one fee, but the rental dwelling license multiple units would be charged an additional fee per unit in there to account for the time that it takes to inspect and approve those licenses. So that's one of the differences that would be with this kind of new structure, to make sure that those are being accounted for and that units that are coming in are being inspected. The cost per call follows the same structure as the business license. And then starting on page 26, we have the table which goes over the call ratios. What we did with this is, again, mapped out all those calls, and we had to utilize a number of different sources in order to identify the unit types. First, we used data provided by the city of classifying the different rental units and what kind of unit they were, whether they were single family, whether they were a condo, townhome, duplex, and we worked that way to start to identify all the units that were rentals. We also worked on there's a housing unit database that the state has, which kind of goes into more detail with kind of the unit types and what they are. And then finally, when all else failed, we pulled up the Utah County parcel map and we actually looked at each address that needed attention to say, this is this kind of a unit. All to help us to categorize the unit types. And so again, this is on the disproportionate side, kind of classifying each different style of unit based on their impact. And these, again, can be changed. They can be combined if need be. But as kind of they currently stand, you can see the different ratios per there, where a single family rental did not show to have a greater impact than your owner occupied single family. Whereas if you look down at multifamily 5 units above, they had a significantly higher impact than a single family home, which is then shown based on their cost. On table 36 on the next page, it goes into that, where a single family rental would be charged kind of a base fee to process the license, but they would not be charged a disproportionate fee because of their impact. Whereas the multifamily 5 units or above would obviously be charged a disproportionate because of the impact that they're having on the city. And again, that's one of the key things, is that this is looking at the actual impact based off of the calls for service at each location. The same process goes through to calculate the license fees. Again, you charge your base license fee with whatever disproportionate cost you have on there. Revenue projections. Currently, there's about $100,000 or so that came in based on all those estimates. With the just proposed base fee for the rental dwelling licenses, it would have been about $545,000 of revenue. If the base fee and the proportionate fee were adopted, that revenue would increase to about $822,000. And this is kind of one of the things that gets discussed about this, and I'm sure there'll be more discussion later on this, is the idea of a good landlord program. State code has a provision that if a city adopts a new disproportionate license fee, you are required to do kind of two things: adopt a good landlord program, as well as have some kind of a fee reduction program for your rental dwelling disproportionate fee. These are done in a lot of different ways. Usually is by a third party who does this to provide training to the landlord to hopefully reduce the costs. Larry mentioned that they have done kind of a survey of cities who have done the good landlord program, and most of them have found it to be not helpful. And most, I think, in fact, encourage the city not to do that. But this is the kind of the one area where the state code does kind of provide some very concrete direction that if you do the disproportionate fee, you have to then have a good landlord program and take on all that entails. But that kind of, is a deep dive into both components of the study. And again, what I wanted to emphasize with this is that the study is showing this is what the true cost is to the city. This is what it actually takes to issue business licenses, rental dwelling licenses, and the revenue, the fees that are on there are to make up that cost. It's not to make the city rich on it, but to make sure you're meeting costs. It's what we call a revenue sufficiency model, to make sure there's revenue sufficient to meet those expenses. But again, as with the study that occurred, years ago, obviously the decision on where that lands kind of lies with the city council. But I'm not sure if there's any other additional questions that can answer for you, or I'm sure I can turn it back to Laramie as well.
It's probably more for Laramie. The cities that you guys looked at, were they university cities, or were they just cities flat out?
So it's interesting when we reached out two different ways. There is a third party that offers a good landlord program, which you can enroll, you take the courses and certify and do things that way. They have a list of participating cities that work with them, and we reached out to every one of those cities. We also belong to the Utah Business Licensing Association of Utah, and every city in the state also belongs to that organization. And Lindsay, in fact, reached out to every one of those licensing people in every city with a survey, and we asked them the same set of questions, and 5-6 responses back from those. So I don't even remember if that was another university city.
I think we have one. Yeah.
So we basically just got those responses that actually replied to us. When we reached out, some of them actually had a couple that responded and gave us input and asked that we not mention who they were coming forward, because it was not something that they recommended doing at all. They was pretty passionate about not doing. And so it's a horrible idea. Don't do it. Don't say we told you so. But
I'm sorry, what did they say not to?
they said not to mention their names. So
especially in a public meeting.
We haven't. So we did reach out to all cities, and I think the general consensus was, I think we probably had 2 out of all of them that said, do it if you want. We're neutral. It didn't provide any benefit. We didn't see any measurables as far as the increase of the standard of what a rental dwelling would be in your city or in their city. So the one thing they were all consistent in saying that it is more resources that you'll incur, and your hands will be tied most of the time with some of the new rules of things that you can and cannot decide for. So at the end of the day, it didn't make sense for most of them to continue the program because they really saw no benefit from it.
Right, but our cities like 50+ % rentals, right? And we do have a lot of issues with the rentals. I mean, we're probably more rentals than any other city in the state. And so I'm just wondering what another city that has as many rentals as we do, if it would actually be worth it. Because I mean, Pleasant Grove City not having as many rentals, I can see how they'd be like, whatever, not worth my time. But we are really heavy into rentals here.
I think also one thing to consider is, like Aaron had mentioned, to charge that disproportionate fee, you have to have the good landlord program. And have the good landlord program, you have to offer that discount as an incentive. And I think what we heard from the majority of those cities was even that incentive, at whatever discount that was something that most landlords just checked the box, that they took the online commerce and checked the box and said, okay, we did that, and now give us a discount. But some of the course materials that would hopefully make them be better landlords didn't seem to make a difference in the standard of rental that was out there. So when you look at the actual programs, and of course, as the city, we can decide what it is that we would like them to be, schooled on or whatever. And of course, you will have that decision to make if you want to do that at what discount you would like to offer. Obviously, the bigger the discount, the more participation. But again, any discount is already going to put us back to where we were before, where the revenue projections that Aaron had outlined simply to show us the break-even point. So anything offered as a discount, well, that is back into the negative again. So to your point, as far as the increased quality of rental dwellings in our city as compared to the cities that may have a similar situation, I don't know.
Thank you. Rachel. Yes, so looking at the state code on the disproportionate rental fee, it says that exempt businesses are those rental units that have 4 residential units or less. So it seems that like everything on this first half of that chart, you can't charge a disproportional fee on. It's only when you've got 5 or more units that you can do that.
Yeah, so it's exempt businesses are, 4 or fewer units and 1 unit occupied by the owner.
Right. So why would you even be looking at a disproportionate cost for an ADU or a duplex or a multifamily home that's got 2 to 4 units? If by state law, we wouldn't be able to charge that fee anyway.
I think for the purposes of the studies to show this is what the impact of those are. It's not necessarily that, hey, you're going to charge this. It's just to be able to identify this is the impact that we're seeing from this style of unit.
Okay, so we're seeing that we have these additional costs for these units, but we actually have no way that we could recover it even if we did implement a good landlord program for that whole first half of that chart that's on the bottom of page 28.
Yeah, there are certain types of units where, you just have, the cost is just, the cost of doing business essentially, where you can't recover that based on that, but still showing, hey, here's what the impact of these style of units are.
Okay.
Is your projected revenue based on using the disproportionate fees that we can't actually charge?
It's a good question. It's been a while since I've looked at that revenue projection. I believe it does take that into account. I can go back and double check that just to be sure. But I believe we did take that into account.
I was gonna say, I'm noticing, looking at the chart, that single family, for example, it shows the same number in both columns. So I'm assuming under both base fee and disproportionate cost. So it looks like, at least on that line, looks like we're not anticipating any additional revenue from disproportionate cost because the number doesn't change.
Base, I mentioned.
Right,
Right. So it would be.
True. Townhome is the same. Duplex is the same.
Yeah, that's true. So I guess it's not showing.
So some of them are the same, but some of them aren't.
That goes up to one of the earlier charts that they had based on the calls and everything going for it.
Mm-hmm.
Any more questions for Aaron? We continue on. Can we go back to the PowerPoint presentation?
Of course.
Thanks, Aaron. So, like I said, we've kind of already went over this in a little bit of discussion we've just had, but I thought I would give some highlights and some recommendations of each component, business licensing versus rental dwelling licenses. I think obviously to start with business licensing, the current fee structure itself will change. The current fees now, they start at about $125 based on 0 to 5 employees and can go up to 800. And obviously with our new fee structure, they'll be a little bit higher than that. So the fee structure will change. Like Aaron said, the current revenue generated annually now is about $500,000. Proposed revenues based on the base fee only, we get $640,000, and the base fee plus the disproportionate fee is $968,000. And I always frame it in our conversation with time lately is it's not just the actual cost, but I always call that I've been calling it the break-even point. So realistically, at the end of the day, to have a business licensing program in Provo City, the actual cost to the city itself today is $968,000. So if we're just looking at a break-even point, the break-even point today is that number. So anything below that I would consider a subsidy. So, and you could tell we've been subsidizing licensing in the city for some time to the tune of almost $500,000. So based on that, well, and I did throw that graph back up in there again that Aaron had went over. I just think it's important to know that even though we raised those fees, it's showing that if we're right there in the middle of the pack, obviously where we're at today has been significantly lower for a long time. I think I would think it'd be easy to argue that even adopting the fees as they're proposed doesn't put us out of the norm. So based on that, the staff recommendation that we have is to adopt the proposed fee structure based on the business classifications, because that does seem to make the most sense, is look at the classifications of those businesses rather than just employee count. And the base fee, I don't remember what it was, it goes to 250 something versus 125 to start is not a significant, it's significant, but it's not outlandish. And also, in going through this process over the last year, I have reached out to just a couple of people in the community, just a couple of business owners, just to see what the temperature is out there. And mainly in my conversations with DPI, for example, with Quinn, we've talked about these types of things, and I think we all recognize that the costs aren't crazy. I think the biggest concern I got back from the business community and those that I spoke with there was we just don't want any kind of shock coming to us that we just weren't prepared for. So the fact that you're even reaching out and talking to us today makes us feel so much more comfortable in the fact that, hey, at least you thought about us when you're going through this process and you're not trying to all of a sudden spring that on us in a council meeting and they're like, oh, we didn't even know to show up to have an argument. So I've not had any pushback and I've not really even had many questions as far as what we're doing, other than I just kind of said, this is a study we're going through and we're trying to find out what it's actually costing the city and try to be fair in that way. So that being said, yeah, our recommendation is we don't feel that the proposed fee structure is inappropriate, and we would recommend the new fee structure as well as that disproportionate fee.
So Laramie, the bar chart with the green bar being Provo, that reflects the adopted fee, the new fees.
It does. And then the red obviously is the average, so we're kind of right there.
If the new proposed base fee and disproportionate fee is adopted, though, wouldn't that be, you mentioned some businesses saying, as long as it's not shocking, wouldn't that be a fairly significant increase for some businesses?
For some, it would be a significant increase. But I think the ones that it would be a significant increase for, it would be those that, we're not talking like small mom and pop kind of restaurants or things like that, because it does not make sense that those would have $1,000 licensing fee plus a disproportionate fee. It's usually those that I think they're well aware of the impact that they have on the community, and they're usually those bigger businesses that, you know, $1,000 business license doesn't say, oh, I'm leaving Provo for Orem or something like that. It would be expected. So I'm sure that in a public hearing, we will probably have some of those come give their input as to what they think is fair. But so far, what's being proposed, it is what it is. That is what the cost of doing business in Provo is. So, and that for us, it's pretty cut and dry when it comes to business licensing. When it comes to rental dwelling licenses, this one gets a little confusing or a little tricky when it comes to that disproportionate fee in the Good Landlord program. But just to recap, the current fee structure, it'll change slightly just because we'll start looking at the amount of dwelling units that they have under each license. Right now, it's just 1 or 2 or more. Currently, the fees are $20 for a single unit and it's $60 for 2 or more. So they could have 100 units and they're being charged $60. So I don't think anyone can argue with the fact that that is just does not seem right. There's a reason why our current revenue for the rental dwelling licensing aspect of the licensing program did only generate about $121,000 last fiscal year. The proposed revenue for just the base fee, if we just look at that base fee for the application processing, does raise that revenue to $540,000, and the disproportionate fee does raise that to $822,000. But as Aaron mentioned, we don't get too much into that again, but that disproportionate fee does require a good landlord program, and that good landlord program comes with a number of things tied to it as far as resourcing and discounts and things like that. So with that, it seems pretty easy for us to recommend to adopt the proposed base fee, because that seems like a no-brainer, because that's just the processing of that application that we all know takes X amount of dollars to do. But to further discuss the disproportionate fee, simply because that good landlord program, it depends on what you all feel is something we want to do as a city or you would like to see in the city going forward as far as raising that standard of the quality of rentals in the city. So I think anything going forward, any discount offered, again, does bring us below that break-even point, but you all may decide that that's worth it to raise that standard of the rental dwelling units in the city, and of course that's something to be considered as well. But some of those discounts, it's kind of interesting that we saw in other cities, they gave large discounts. It wasn't just 5-10%. Some of them gave 75%. Some gave, I mean, it was crazy. So that actually would take us not only below the disproportionate fee, but it would take us below the base fee only. So it doesn't make any sense why we would do that in all the research that we've done, that in the surveys that we've put out there, and speaking with the other cities and whatnot, that to not really see any measurable improvement in that standard of the rental dwelling itself. We just didn't feel that recommending that disproportionate fee in the good landlord program at this time made sense. So if we wanted to have a further discussion on what that might look like, as far as changing the criteria for what the good landlord program could be, we could discuss that too. But today it was just mainly to go over the analysis itself and to give these basic recommendations. So.
Yes, Councilmember McKay.
This is awesome. Thank you so much. I love how detailed it was in explaining how the prices were, you know, how we got there, and it's fantastic to get it done. I like your recommendations, and I think that that's what we should go ahead with.
Other questions, comments? Laramie, to whatever extent the council decides to adjust the fees, what's the typical rollout for something like, does it have to align with a fiscal year, or can it just take effect on a given date?
Not that I'm aware of. It can happen anytime, other than we have some limitations on the current software that we use for everything licensing is CityView. And this is a much more complex fee schedule than we currently have programmed. And I don't think that's something that we can do in-house. We've spoke with Josh and our IT department a little bit about that, and that we would have to get on board with City View's support and their IT staff to help us make those changes, and would expect that to be 6 months-ish. That I think best case scenario, we would hope that we could get that done probably the first of the year, maybe January-ish. And then of course, with the rental dwelling licenses, it even becomes that much more complex, because if you decide to do a good landlord program and you offer a discount, currently I don't think the program's even set up for us to charge a fee, have them enroll in a class, and then give them a discount, and then we give them a reimbursement, or they give them a credit for something in the future. So, and then all the fees right now are based upon employees. We have to change that to the new structure for classification. So there's a lot behind that. But I think we've discussed it to some degree that we think it's feasible, that we could probably get something out by the first of the year.
Okay. Any other questions? Just comment? Yes.
I also just want to say thank you. This is so helpful and so much more detailed than I expected. And that's going to be very helpful in terms of making difficult decisions. I too feel like we should have businesses paying for business services and not being subsidized. We just went through this whole discussion with water rates, and part of that was to realign it as well. So I appreciate the good work you've done here that will help us in making those decisions.
Councilor Biden.
So do we need to make a motion?
What would
And
be the
vote on
next
it?
step, Justin, to give staff,
So if you'd like to move forward and bring these recommendations to a night meeting, a motion would be great. If you'd like to just bring back to work meeting to continue to ask questions or have further discussion on potential good landlord program, as Larry mentioned, that would be probably a further discussion, but if you'd like to move forward, that motion would be great. We could work internally with customer service on what affected case might look like. That might also give some time, some lead time to get more information on the business community, so that they're not taken back by potential.
I like that. I like having the vote sooner rather than later so that they can prepare for that. But I'm not really set on it has to be the first of the year. I'm even good with it being into the next budget season and then beginning like we would with any utility, right?
I could add to Councilor Bogdan's comment there.
Well, it also matters. I wonder if we figured in the budget, some of these, you know, if they consider these increases somewhere in the budget, then that needs to be, we need to assume, we need to do when we can do it, not waiting a whole other budget year.
We try to be really conservative on the number, not knowing the timing, but if there is a revenue component included in this next fiscal.
That you're expecting an increase.
kind of
Right.
mid-budget year, mid-fiscal year.
Well, I think the number that we looked at was approximately $100,000. So you can see from the numbers, it's very conservative from each.
Well,
And
but that would take the whole increase per year.
Well, there's
For rental dwellings, but not for businesses.
yeah.
No, because it was.
300 or 400.
Yeah, but you're looking at half.
I was thinking
Yeah.
million and
Yeah.
100,000. Okay, yes,
Zero.
excellent.
I like to think my checking account is.
So, Larry, in addition to the timeline to getting the new system set up, what would be the cost for doing that? And would that just be a one-time cost?
That would be a one-time cost, and we have kind of put that out there that we have to get a proposal from City View on the implementation of adding the reprogramming of the new fee structure. We have not got anything from them, so I'm not sure what that would be.
Okay. Like, is there a chance that the cost of implementing it would eat up that whole first year's additional revenue?
That's not likely the
That could be
case.
crazy. I don't know. That's why I asked.
That's not likely the case, but,
Okay.
and talking with Aaron too, we did say that knowing going forward that there may be some implementation costs, software costs, even if we did, decide to do something with a good landlord program, and of course, that's gonna require more resources, that we could always update this study to include those costs in what the actual costs are. That would change those numbers slightly. So by the time we wanted to do an update, even a year or two from now, it'd be a simple update to the study. And then if we chose to update the fees at the time, we could do that. But we didn't anticipate anything being kind of a showstopper there where we couldn't couldn't get it done, so.
Counselor McKay?
I'd like to make a motion that we come back to a council meeting with the business licenses, looking at the increase in license plus a disproportionate fee, and bring back the RDLs without the disproportionate fee.
You said to a work meeting or to a evening?
Council meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I second that.
Okay, we have a motion to prepare this for a council meeting by Councilmember McKay with a second by Councilor Whipple. Any discussion?
Makes sense.
I wouldn't mind seeing the impact of the disproportionate fee on larger businesses as part of that discussion.
Sure.
So we'll call for a vote on that. Councilor Christensen?
Yes.
Councilor Garrett, yes. Councilor Whipple?
Yes.
Councilor Bogdan?
Yes.
Councilor McKay?
Yes.
And I don't think we have, okay. All right, so that motion passes 5-0.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Larry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you again, Aaron. We'll now take a brief break. We'll reconvene at 3:35 for our final presentation.
Recording stopped.
Hey there, hopefully you guys can hear me.
But anyway, I'm gonna talk to her
Okay.
and see.
Recording in progress.
All right, we'll go ahead and reconvene our work session. Next, we have a presentation regarding station area plans that will be presented to us by Hannah Saltz, one of our partners. Hannah, welcome back.
Feels like I was just here with the maps.
A week or two ago.
Right, so this is for all 4 station area plans. I apologize for doing that to your calendar. We tried to break them up into groups, but it just didn't work out that way. We'll start kind of in the same order that we've done the others with 2230 North and University Avenue, then Joaquin and Vermont. All plans are also now available online at provo.gov/planning under the station area plan tab with the appendices. So I'll skip through this. This is mostly for the public at the planning commission meeting, but we are right at the end of the process that's been going for several years now. The next steps after this meeting, it will go to a council meeting, which will be effectively the final vote with the public hearing. It's the last time the council can make decisions about the document or make any changes. Then we'll submit it for review by UTA, MAG, and the SAP board, which is the mayors of all of the cities in Utah County that have to have these plans. I've already gotten a green light from MAG and UTA with the plans as they are. They do plan to approve them. We will find out their final vote though on September 17th and bring it back to the very next available council meeting for you to give your final approval. Your approval in July will be approval as to form, just by a resolution stating your intent to submit. And then October 7th will be the final adoption by ordinance. At that point, you can't make any other changes without having to go through the whole review process again though. So this is really our last
And that would be more work, right? Just to be clear.
It would be more work and we would miss the final deadline by the end of the year. Yeah, it'd be too late to submit again. And then we'll work on the rezones as soon as possible to get those done to you. We've got a little more time on those. All right, starting with 2230 North, the vision and goals are what are in your document. I've tried to just pull them out here with some highlights. This is built on the feedback we got from residents in the large survey, in our open houses, but also feedback from staff, other planning documents. This is identified as one of our gateway areas for the city, so also including some of the gateway goals. You'll note as we're going that these first few goals in each appear in almost every single one of the plans. In this area, though, too unique, we will create a design corridor along University Parkway as one of the goals. That's identified already in our list of future design corridors in our general plan, and fits also with it being one of our gateways in the gateway plan. And then work with developers to include upscaling wastewater and water lines. Our wastewater master plan identifies a few areas as being a little bit deficient. This is a pretty standard practices we're developing, just identifying it up front for everyone involved. Future land use map and the future transportation map. Transportation solid means it's already there. Dotted means it's planned, committed to in this plan. We will have to follow up with the state on our goals. And there's a timeline of implementation for that in the final implementation chapter matrix. This future land use, again, has to be matching with our zoning that's on the ground by the end of the year. Single family being our single family multiplex, roughly LDR, row homes, roughly, or sorry, VLDR, row homes, roughly LDR. Sorry about that. Stacked housing, roughly MDR, and the 5+ being roughly HDR. There's the rezoning we plan to bring to you. But we found that as we were talking with the public or even consultants or members of MAG in the state that didn't know our zoning code specifically, they had no sense of what LDR versus MDR meant. But this sense of mass and scaling was pretty generally understood. So that's why it's this, but just know that's the zone translation. And there are no changes to this map from the version that was brought to you last time. All of these maps are identical. All right, University Avenue. Oh, any questions on 2230 before I move to University Avenue?
No. Mine is more overall.
Yeah.
I'm noticing an overall sense of we're encouraging homeowner occupancy, except for in probably the University Avenue station. How are we going to guarantee that? There's nothing in there that I can see that's in code that we can guarantee that a certain percentage of these are going to be homeowner occupied.
That's fair. It's something that we're going to be working with developers on, but we can't guarantee it in these areas any more than we can anywhere else in the city. But it is a general citywide goal to be increasing homeownership.
Well, but we could guarantee it when we're in control of the zoning change, but they're making us change the zone preemptively, so we'll have zero control.
I have brought that up to MAG and to the League of Cities and Towns at our quarterly discussion meetings about this. And that's something that every other city is feeling pressure on too. We kind of lose our biggest negotiation lever when we no longer have the rezone. So, you're right, and Provo's not alone in this. You look like you want to say something? Okay. But we'll work with developers, we'll try to communicate it, we'll try to make sure that they know that's what the city wants to see. And we're exploring other tools as they're becoming available.
This is my biggest rub with the whole thing is this. And I would like to see something in there that states, even in our code, that states, however we can do it. I mean, I'm fine following their plan as long as we can make sure that some of these are homeowner occupied. Brian, you look like your wheels are turning.
They are, but they're spinning in place. I'm not getting, I mean, this is essentially, we did a training this morning. The legal office did a training this morning for the supervisors in the city. And one of the things that we were talking about was state preemption. And we've just talked about it too with the tandem parking thing. And I don't know, off the top of my head, I'm not coming up with any ideas. This is one of the, as Hannah just said, this is essentially a thing where the state has told us we have to rezone them. And once we do, we lose our leverage. So I will keep thinking about it, but I am not coming up with any bright ideas in the last 30 seconds.
So we can't say that anything in these zones, in these station area plans, has to have 25% occupancy that comes forward.
It wouldn't be legally enforceable. These plans aren't legally binding.
Right, because these are general plan documents, long-range planning documents, that's not binding. You'd have to follow that up with actual ordinance. You have to amend the code. And then just mind that whatever zones we amended here, that would apply to the zones all over the city.
And that is an option. We have to meet the state code of increasing the availability and affordability of housing in station areas. We get to decide how to do that though. And with the way it's written in code, we made sure to leave it open so that as other tools become available, we'll be able to add them to the toolkit.
So we're not legally required to rezone everything?
We get to decide what the future land use map looks like. Where we're required to change things by the state is that whatever our future land use map looks like, our zoning has to match it by the end of the year.
And see, that's the weird disconnect, is that normally our general plan documents are planning documents, and they, in fact, they're only advisory. You don't even ever have to comply with them. You know, you've probably heard me rant before about the fact that it's not actually necessary to change the general plan before approving a rezone that violates the general plan, because they don't have to match. But in this case, the state has told us that they do. You know, Justin whispered in my ear the very idea that was going through my head, which is the only thing that I can think of, but I just don't know how feasible it is, which is essentially put homeowner occupancy rules into the zone so that you can't build in the zone. But I don't have a good feel for how feasible that is, because it then applies to the whole zone everywhere throughout the city, and it doesn't really apply to the it's not just to developments, right? I mean, you've got a situation where somebody comes in and wants to sell their single family home that they've owned for 80 years, and now it's an illegal use for it not to be homeowner occupied. I agree with what Justin said. That's the only idea that I've come up with, but I don't.
It just doesn't seem very feasible.
Doesn't seem.
And I worry about the preemption or idea that you brought up. Is as soon as it happens, I'm sure something will happen.
We've talked in planning too. If we had any good ideas, you would have seen an item about it already. I don't know that I can fully resolve this, because this is something that every city is dealing with. So if we had an easy answer or a quick one.
Are other cities doing as big a radius as we're doing? Is the radius controlled?
The radius is set by state code. Yeah, for the quarter mile around UVX and half mile around Front Runner. Other cities are generally a little bit more intense or more planned from what we've seen, as we're looking at Vineyard, Lehigh. They've got some areas that are pretty unbuilt. So they're able to do an almost like a master plan sort of community. Vineyard, part of this overlaps with their Utah City, so they're counting some of that as their planned area. Ours is all redevelopment and infill, which is why you notice the land use chapter is pretty sparse, but the redevelopment chapter is pretty content heavy, because any land use development in this area is redevelopment. In all of our city, or our station area plans, this is some of the oldest, most built out parts of our city. They've been built out for decades. So we're in a different bag than most of the other cities. I'll keep moving. Feel free to keep thinking about that. If you have any other thoughts, we can circle back to it. For the University Avenue station, same goal of density and owner occupancy. In this case, we add preserving historic districts, because this does border up on some. We drew that hard line in the sand at 2nd East. Here are the same maps. This again is identical to what we talked about in the meeting, except that we updated this area because we realized that on Center Street, this needed to be commercial. I think we had it as housing before. That came up at the tail end of the meeting, but that is a commercial area. Any thoughts at the University Avenue stations? Okay. Jumping slightly back up to Joaquin, this is the only one where we don't have a home ownership goal, just because there's such a small area that isn't already carved out for student rentals and a student focus. This is a renter area. It's one of the densest areas in our whole city.
Yeah. Okay, so I've heard for years that Joaquin is one that needs open space. We do have the park amenities down by the mall one, but I didn't see any park amenities for future here. Is that something that's needed?
It's the one. In talking with others in this area and looking at it, there is the park that's just down here that's pretty accessible, but it's not very well used by the college residents there. Okay. So I don't know that adding our typical green space would really serve college students well, unless it was geared more toward college students, and it's difficult to create for that. This duck pond south of campus is very well utilized and walked around, lots of picnics, and it's a good family area. I've taken a kids and moms group where we took the kids on the bus, hopped off here, walked over and fed the ducks and walked around. And I've seen other families doing that as well. We are proposing to add this greenway strip leading from some of the densest housing areas, giving an off-road access for pedestrians and cyclists to the library and also to the station just on the other side of the library. This could also function as a bit of a linear green space as well, is the idea.
Well, if they have picnic areas, if people are taking picnics up there, it might be good to have picnic areas across this little green space area if you're looking at functional space, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be the hope. I don't know that that's outlined explicitly in the code. If this gets a majority support from the council, we can add a line about that where it's discussed in text, but it wouldn't be in the goal specifically. The goal is pretty vague. Okay. Any other questions about walking? We are blowing through this. You guys are going to get out early. This is great. Okay, front runner is the largest because it is a half-mile radius with a lot of similar goals, including preserving historic districts. We do propose extending the downtown design standards down around the front runner station, all the way down to the northern edge of the mall, going out to University Avenue. That's something that we heard a lot from the businesses in this area, especially in the startup, is they really appreciate the aesthetic of downtown and the character that that gives the neighborhood. It gives it a good sense of place. And as we're seeing development and uses spreading south from downtown, they want to carry over the same aesthetic with it.
I love that.
Okay.
So question, so projects like race that are already kind of in process.
Yeah.
They're not using the downtown standards, are they? Design standards?
I think Mill Race is just within the area, so they're already held to those. Yeah.
So that's already been in place.
For the north side of the tracks where Mill Race is.
So you're saying south of the track?
This would go south of the tracks from Freedom. I wish I had a map in here. I'm sorry. This is the map didn't make it in, but from Freedom Boulevard, I'll pull up the maps. It would come along Freedom Boulevard down here and up. So this area, as it redevelops, would keep the same aesthetic as downtown.
So I had you have a lot of concerns with this. So in there, it said that we were going to encourage people to use, that we need lower income, or how did I say this? We need apartment spaces that charge lower rents and things like that. So we're encouraging them to go for different things that would allow people with lower incomes to be here. The thing that I've heard about Franklin and Franklin South for years, and I even heard it again from one of our neighborhood chairs, this is a high rental location with people that are the poorest in our city. I don't agree with that kind of language being in these neighborhoods. I think they need to have market rate apartments or market rate or condoize it. I don't think that we should be encouraging in this part of the city more subsidized housing for any reason.
I agree.
Yeah, at this point, it's just encouraged. We expect that most housing that comes in, this is the trend across the city, most housing is market rate, but there are a few who are seeking for additional. If there's somewhere specifically you'd like me to add the language in the plan,
I would like to just take it out. Yeah, take out the encourage, take out the, yeah.
Okay. Can I get a straw poll from the council? Because we do just formally need a majority before we change the documents.
Wait, where is, I want to look at the language itself.
Yeah, I
what it looks
want to
like
make sure
for
this
that
is as
paragraph when we
specific as
change
we
it.
can. Was it one of the goals or was it in text? Where are you looking?
Is it like number 3?
I don't know where it's probably in the implementation. I mean, it's somewhere where I read it.
Units in the area.
This is everything that's in the implementation matrix. These are all the big headers.
I don't know exactly where it's at in there. I read it and that stood out to me that this is not the location for that. I can see it in other locations, but not here.
What other locations?
I can see it anywhere else but here.
You mean like within other station areas it's appropriate, but not in this station area?
Not in this station area.
Would you say in just the Franklin area or in all parts of the station area? Because this also is the station area that includes all of our homeless services, food and care coalition, that sort of thing.
It's particularly hard in the Franklin and Franklin South neighborhoods.
Okay.
Those are the ones that I'm the most concerned about. Those are the ones that I know the most. the rest of the counselors represent other areas, and so I'm sure that they could give feedback on those. But these two are where we have the My Hometown Initiative. These are the ones that we're getting, even, we got an email not too long ago stating how concerned they were, even around the Franklin neighborhood, with the amount of rentals and the amount of supplemented rental units that are coming in here, and having it just being, it's already a huge poverty area where the school district has to take these and chop them up into 3 different schools. And they are busing some of these kids clear across town because the poverty level in the city is concentrated in one location.
Okay. Council staff, would it be possible to pull up the document online? provo.gov South Planning?
See on page 2 of the staff report,
And I'm looking at,
increasing the availability and affordability of housing, including moderate income housing.
It was more towards the station area, this station area plan, and it may be implementations in this station area plan that pulled out to me that we would be encouraging, and it specifically said section 8 housing.
council staff is pulling up the document in the redevelopment chapter where we talk about low-income housing. There's a section called affordable and attainable housing where we give some income levels and list the tools that are available.
Page?
Yes, these 2 pages are the spread.
But it specifically says encourage, like section 8 housing, and it specifically talks about the income levels of the people here and how it's noted that they need affordable housing for, the lower income, and how we will be encouraging. It specifically says section 8 housing. It comes up with a list of tools, of different financial tools that they can use.
Yeah, what page is it on? I'm finding one on top of page 47 that's saying it is encouraged in the strongest terms that a portion of any new units should be affordable. Implementing the following strategies will help ensure affordable housing remains a priority in this station area. And then it lists a couple, section 8 not specifically, but
the one I looked at is specifically section 8.
Maybe, yeah. Can you do a search for section 8?
But anywhere that it talks about it for those particular areas,
We've got a leverage housing program, which includes that section 8.
Yeah, like housing.
So yeah, this is the line that I read and I guess was mentioned in here under leverage housing programs. Is that the line you're talking about, Becky?
It must be, because the section 8 pulled out really strong to me.
What would the council like to see? There are a few options. We can strike this and keep only the descriptive language. We can get rid about talking about affordable housing, although I don't know that that's appropriate for the entire area. We can say it is encouraged throughout the station area, except in the Franklin and Franklin South neighborhoods. We can get more specific. What would meet the council's thinking for this?
I think we should do something exempting that area. And even, I think it would be positive to even imply that we need moderate and above housing there to combat since as the highest poverty area, balance out that area.
We could say that in all areas except those already saturated with affordable housing initiatives, it is encouraged that way it leaves open some areas that might still need it, but in these areas where there's already a lot, it's discouraged. I can finesse the wording, but something to that effect.
So we want a policy that would encourage gentrification.
That's like a shade word.
Oh,
I don't see it.
I think that like investment in fixing up, though, I didn't realize that was a pejorative.
Yeah. I think, reinvestment, and that we can, lift up the area and give more opportunities and more leadership and more community involvement, people who will stay there longer. One of the hugest issues there is schools and how quickly kids turn around. It's how the length of time of people are staying there is extremely disruptive to them.
It's the schools, it's the churches, it's everything. It's hard on those two entire neighborhoods. It's so hard. We're bringing in outside areas
like every day. Like the schools are getting such a turnaround that they can't even progress their classes.
They are working on English They're not working on math.
Yes,
in
exactly.
Science and
Yep.
they're just working on teaching kids English. And by the time they even start to begin, they're gone.
Around, yeah.
And then they take those end of year tests, your tests. And it just is bringing down the scores of the schools to the point where Franklin and Spring Creek are the two highest poverty schools in the city. And both of them are right there. They take half of Franklin South and bus them clear across to Spring Creek.
It's just not sustainable. Like, we need to make the community more sustainable.
It does need to be more sustainable. And everything that I hear from the people, and I've even gone to their wards in there, they need something different. They cannot sustain any more of what is there. They cannot. And we've even brought in programs to help lift these people up because it's gotten out of control. And so to add this language in for those two neighborhoods, I can't.
Do you feel like you can make a motion, Becky, based on urban trees, based on what you're representing, proposing?
I trust you to find language, Hannah. I think it needs to be a little more purposeful than just an exemption. But I think you can find the language, but just something to consider the socioeconomic, and that this area doesn't need, as being the highest poverty level in the city, we need to add more sustainability, long-term residents, and
with that kind of adjusted language have the support
I don't
of
know.
the rest of the council.
I'm not particular to the language, like it just.
Well, I'm because, right now we have a lot of people who are very low income who are living here right now. And if the idea is through investment and redevelopment, make it so there are fewer housing opportunities for people in that income level, where do they go? Are we going to be investing in these lower income opportunities in other parts of the city, or are we going to hope they live somewhere outside of our city? Like, because this is a population who's here right now that we're looking at, hoping to price out of the area.
Isn't this language already in the other stations?
Yes.
That's the kind of the purpose. I think all we're doing here is saying, this is already so far to the other spectrum. The others are not. So I think,
Everywhere but.
yeah, the language in the other stations, I think, is helping to address that issue. We're just saying here, we need a better balance.
I agree.
Okay.
It seems like what you're saying is that redevelopment pressure might create longer term stability in the neighborhood, but for those people who are priced out by this turnover, it creates instability at an individual level for them. And you're concerned about the individual level, balancing that with the.
Yeah, and that's already a population that's quite unstable, and it's, personally and, societally a very costly thing. Yeah, so I'm just trying to understand kind of a bigger picture, like what changing it for this area would mean.
We have a lot of low income housing in the city, more than any other city in the county. So it's definitely there.
Hannah, is this leveraging housing programs paragraph in all of the plans under the redevelopment chapter? It is. Okay.
Why not just take out that one in this one chapter?
Just take out that one paragraph in this chapter. It would still encourage, in the strongest terms, affordable units. It would just get rid of this particular list of assets, but the philosophy would still be there. And it seems like it's the philosophy that you have more of a concern with.
Can you get rid of the two paragraphs?
Yeah. I just want to see this area not becoming more.
And that's what the people there are asking for too.
They want to be lifted up. They are. The people there are asking for something different. They're asking to stop what's going on and let's try to make something different. Let's evolve this into something more stable. Let's evolve this into something where we can have functional wards, where we can have functional schools, where the kids that live by the elementary school can actually walk to their elementary school instead of being bused clear across town. Because they're not able to, even though there's a concentration of schools right there, and they can't access those services, and that's really hard on these families as well because they're bused clear across town. Can we bring and lift ourselves up so that our kids can go to the local school, so that our wards can function correctly. And so we don't have so many issues. I mean, even the Boulders have so many issues that those wards, it gets really exhausting for their leadership to have to meet all of those needs because there are so many needs.
So my question is, do we not want to ensure that affordable housing remains a priority in this particular station area?
Yes.
We don't want that to be the priority.
I don't think so.
It already has an excessive amount of it, is the point.
Right,
Just to be clear, taking that out as a goal, which would be fine, doesn't preclude it from happening if the
Right.
goal proposes it,
Right.
right?
But you're not telling them this is what we want here.
Right.
But we're not, that's what we're saying, we're not sending this message here.
Wouldn't we as council still be able to weigh in?
Not after we've gone.
Not without a reason.
But if we take the language out, are you saying it doesn't matter? Listen.
I think if you take the language out, it's helping to send the message that you want, but it doesn't preclude somebody from proposing a new LIHTC building if that's what they want to do. So
You're just setting expectations that taking it out doesn't create some kind of magic barrier.
right.
So can we put language in there that says we encourage market rate?
Sure, that's a goal of the plan. That's what the council would like in there, certainly.
Market rate dwellings and homeowner occupancy in this area?
Sure, and I would send that message, but again, if somebody came in and proposed for LIHTC, we would be able to say no to that.
Right.
Right. You just want to make sure we understand that, right?
Yes.
I think I always understood that. I just don't want to send that message to anyone.
That's fine.
I would rather send the message to people in the wording. We want market rate housing here. We want, I mean, it's right there next to the train station. Hop on it, go to wherever you need to go. It's right there next to UVX. Hop on it, go out to wherever you need to go. You've got the Target right there. Go get your groceries, walk and do whatever you need to do. But this section of these plans, we encourage it. Maybe we should have something like we encourage it to be market rate housing.
Like when the housing authority was considering that one complex that would be, 80% market rate and 20% low income. Those condo products, now that would have been amazing.
Right.
And that would have been a win.
The other LIHTC program, building our office.
Yes, and that's not ideal.
So I would suggest, I think this is something that needs a motion. This is one of those ones where it's really hard for staff to kind of take individual opinions.
Yeah, okay, let's make a motion.
well, I'm still looking at it. It seems like what you probably want to do is on page 47, cut out several paragraphs. So it is encouraged in the strongest terms that a portion of any new units be affordable, leverage housing programs, establish community partnerships designed for affordability, and possibly even the prevent displacement. Oh, and the paragraph above the highlighted one too there, Hannah.
Yeah, the prevent displacement is specifically there for the mobile home.
Okay,
In
and
the
so if we took out the rest of it and left in the prevent displacement that went with the mobile home park, then I think that would make sense. And I think that may take out the things that you're concerned with. I mean, we would still have the thing which the HTRZs where percentage has to be affordable. So I think it would be appropriate for your goals to leave in, all of the documentation about the AMI and those other things. But is that right? Is that the section that you would want out?
Yes.
You're talking about all 5 paragraphs, the encouragement, and then all 4 of these gray lists. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And do you want to add the need for owner occupancy? And
I would, if there's council support, I would love to have the need for owner occupancy and market rate rentals.
And it's just the balance, right? It's like how Tip neighborhood is 98% rental and 2% owner occupancy.
Yeah.
That area is just incredibly out of sync.
I think this language is still appropriate for some of what we're seeing along, or what we're expecting to see along University Avenue with some of the mixed use developments. I think as a city, we would still expect to encourage some affordable housing elements in those, a portion of housing, but maybe not in these other Franklin areas where it's a little more saturated. This is where it's difficult to plan for the station area because it is so much bigger than the others. I could add something saying here, you know, accepting Franklin and Franklin South and any portions of the station already saturated with low-income housing and suffering from high turnover and instabilities. In those areas, the city encourages market rate homeowner occupied housing. If you would prefer, I could also add another little orange header sub paragraph at the very end here, noting Franklin and Franklin South market rate housing and have a separate statement there just to draw more attention to it with the colored header. If that meets the need while still keeping these tools for other parts of the station. I appreciate that.
We make a motion for what Hannah has just been saying.
I would second that motion for what Hannah's just been saying. Well, and Rachel too, right? Rachel's been saying some things about deleting paragraphs and putting things.
Well, but I think
I'm
Hannah's not thinking
more
not
adding
to
to
delete the paragraph. Oh, so Hannah was like, we're leaving this in there because that's appropriate for along University Avenue, and then we add.
Oh, so you're just saying the addition.
In a
just
very bright orange header thing for Franklin and Franklin South, because these areas are already oversaturated with below market affordable housing. We need to do whatever Hannah said.
It's creating a new subset.
Yes.
Okay, if
Yeah.
they're gonna do, I think that worked.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yeah.
This preventing displacement again was for the mobile home parks to address some of the concerns the council had there that we as staff had as
Right,
well. We don't
right,
want
right,
these
right,
people to
right.
replace without other options.
Agree.
So I think to strike the whole thing.
Yeah, on that prevent displacement, can we move that closer to the mobile home park bit so that it's clear that it's that instead of these more general housing things or affordable things? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I might add a header for affordable housing and then put something near the mobile home park saying something about displacement. But okay, I'll make sure that it's mentioned in there.
So whoever's taking minutes, were you able to capture that?
The answer is
Councilor Bogdan has made.
Bogdan made the motion.
Yeah.
I can clarify maybe what I was saying in fewer words. Would that be helpful?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. To, on page 47, exempt Franklin South from the encouragement of affordable units and create a subheader to draw attention to their need for market rate owner occupied housing.
Great.
Is that brief enough? Okay.
And it's on the record, so
As you can tell from the length of these plans, brevity has not always been the goal, so hopefully that was brief enough.
Correct?
Pardon?
So your motion is to do what she just described, correct?
Are we all okay with that? You think that'll work?
Yeah.
If we think that'll work, yeah, I can make that motion for what she just said. And
And Craig's
gonna second it.
Now we'll call for Councilor Barrett, yes. Councilor Whipple,
Yes.
Councilor Bogdan.
Yes.
Councilor McKay.
Yes.
Councilor Christensen.
Yes.
Councilor Hoban, were you able to follow that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so that motion passes. That was it.
Great. Okay, there was one more thing in the plans that I wanted to highlight, just to make sure we don't drop that. And then I'm happy to discuss anything else the council would like about Frontrunner. We did have one change from the draft document that you were sent a couple of weeks ago. We got some feedback back from UTA because they are such an important property holder here, as they're no longer going to be the southern terminus with the Provo Central Station. They're planning on redeveloping a portion of the station parking lot. They wanted to make sure that there was some language that gave them some flexibility with the map if they found that other redesigns work better. I think as a city, we anticipate that. We know that if our documents are a version of the future, but if something better comes along that meets need under the future constraints we haven't anticipated, then we'll amend our documents to go with that. So this just says that explicitly so that UTA could satisfy their board, but it doesn't do anything that we as a city weren't already planning on doing. Just letting you know that's the only change to the document.
So I can see better, where is it expected to have some kind of a park I couldn't really see that really well on the, you can't really see really well when you're watching.
Let me go back to
Planning Commission meeting online.
Yeah, well, thank you for watching that, first of all. Your patience knows no bounds. Here, with enhancing green space within the station area. Oh, evaluate alternatives for a future city park. We talked with Parks about a park in this area because right now there isn't really much. There's the park over here, Franklin Park, but that's about it. We're getting some little pocket parks downtown with like the Heart of Provo. Sorry, I keep bumping that. But that came up a lot in our discussions with residents that they wanted to see more green space here.
Yes, they do.
And we would expect that as this area densifies and we see more residents, we would do a needs study and evaluate the option for a future park. Park's concern with putting a park in, and we had a park on our initial maps, was that it boxed them into a certain location that might not be economically feasible for them, or they might want to go on a different block, something like that. They didn't want to be pinned down too much. So they asked that instead of having a green space on the map, we had a goal to have them evaluate where the best location would be. They're also not sure as this area redevelops and prices increase if they'd be able to outcompete a developer to buy land in this area. So we've included in the plan some tools that the city could use. Perhaps a developer deeds a portion of the property to the city for a park, and we give them increased density on the remaining portion, different amenity space requirements, something like that. So it is a need, but as this area redevelops, there are too many unknowns and too many economic risks for parks to feel comfortable putting the needs specifically on the map.
But they were hoping for something below the tracks and across from, so south of Freedom, south of the tracks on Freedom and across from the train station?
Something around here would be ideal. Where we would love to see it, and we've talked with Doug and Parks about this, is something right here along Freedom that's close to the station. People who have a longer wait could have an open space. Maybe you can get some food from, or UTA plans to put some restaurants and services in there, and have a good recreational space that's also close to the new residences that will be added down here at the town center. And it's not a hidden gem, it's right on Freedom Boulevard, people know about it. And there will be the downtown design standards on Freedom Boulevard too, making it a really safe, accessible place that's connected to our bike networks really well. But we aren't putting that on the map because we don't know what's gonna happen with that property.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I was just wondering
if we got to pick, that's where we put it. And Parks is aware. Does that accurately address your concern or adequately?
Yeah,
address
they probably should get on that now if they want property, because that was one thing that came up in our joint school board meeting is what's going on with that property across Freedom from the train station, because it's just an abandoned house and there's not much there. There's nothing there.
Yeah. They said they plan to be redoing their Parks master plan in the next 5 years for the final plan, which means they'll start doing the studies and analysis for it in the next 2-ish, 3-ish years. And they'll include this on their Parks master plan.
Thanks.
Any other questions about the front runner or 400 South area? All right. Well, I will make those changes and bring the final language to you at, oh, I forgot. Planning Commission did recommend 2 changes to the plans. They wanted to add in text to all of the plans. This was their approval with conditions. These are the conditions as the recommendation. You can decide whether or not to take it or leave it. Add somewhere in every single one of the plans some bit of language about using these spaces as active transportation innovation spaces to test out different roadway and bike lane design that could then be replicated if it's successful in other areas of the city. Seems pretty innocuous. The other was, I'll go to the transportation map for this one. They wanted to see a continuation of the 600 South bike lane coming along the tracks, connecting to Freedom Boulevard. A lot of people take their bikes rather than taking them over the bridge. They just, actually, I do intend to have the dogs here. They go over tracks at this crossing.
My concern with that is that's a truck route and that is an industrial place. And we've already made a bike path going up there. To take away that with big trucks right there, just, I heard Lisa's pitch for it, and I get that, but at the same time, we need big trucks in the city, and we need it, that is the truck route.
Yes.
And I'm very, very concerned and very sensitive that that is the truck route, and
Of
that
course.
leads to.
Sorry, I thought you were.
No, go ahead.
No, Public Works also pushed back against it for two reasons. We lack the right of way to put bike lanes there, although they could look at doing sharrows. But also left turns from 600 South on Freedom Boulevard are prohibited, even for bikes. So we don't want to put in infrastructure that implies that this is what they can do. This council could decide that we exempt bikes from the no left turn rule. But with the traffic coming on Freedom, it's really just not very safe for bikes to be crossing there. So we don't want to encourage unsafe behavior. So that was the recommendation from engineering. It counters from the commission. You are the final say though.
I do ride my bike there all the time.
And just because there aren't bike lanes doesn't mean people can't ride there.
Actually, I usually go over to Freedom and then I cross the railroad tracks there.
Going.
So I
South?
head west on 600 West and then I go south on Freedom.
So you're not crossing
You're able to show on there too.
Yeah, you're making an illegal left-hand turn.
You're
Well,
making it.
I will turn right onto Freedom and then do a U-turn and go left or whatever.
That's what the cars are doing. They're taking a right and then they're taking a U-turn.
And a little bike. But because, you know, that's the way to get there, especially when you're coming from the 200 East bike pathway. A lot of people do that because they are coming from the front runner station and they're going back to the train station for their commute at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I say this as somebody who sees the bicycle commuters every morning and every evening going by my house.
There's
Yeah,
nothing in here that would stop people from doing that.
yeah, people
Yeah,
are
it's still
definitely
good.
gonna do that. And so I think the recommendation was probably just a recognition of what people are doing anyway. Yeah, because if I've got my road bike, I can just pick it up and do the little stairs and the bridge over.
That's what Lisa was saying.
With my e-bike, there is no way I can lift that thing and get it up the stairs.
Well, you have to lift it, don't just push it.
It's so heavy. Even pushing it, it's so heavy.
Do they have an elevator there?
There is an elevator and I haven't tried to do that because I feel like I should be an able-bodied person and carry my bike.
Not me, bike girl.
Not that one, no.
And I've heard from others that it can be faster just to do a quick loop around because that end of the platform is open. You can just walk from the ramp. There's a ramp to that platform. So if you're catching a train, just move right on. It is a shorter, faster route than the elevators. But not adding bike lanes here doesn't mean people can't still do that. So if it would be possible to ask for two motions from the council, one for a thumbs up or thumbs down on the first in-text edition of this being innovation spaces for active transportation, and the second on this.
I don't understand what they're saying there, like all this,
Innovation. Yeah.
all of this we think of is the Canyon Road fiasco, and I don't want to repeat that.
Yeah.
What fiasco?
Canyon Road.
When they did the visioning with the hay bales and stuff like that,
Yeah.
Canyon or Timpview?
it was confusing, but I knew exactly what you were talking about.
Yeah, sorry.
Fiasco is the word that tipped me off.
Yeah.
But I also recall you saying something like, we weren't encouraging this because it's along University Avenue where there's a lot of traffic and high
It's
speeds, and we
what
wanted them on different sections, right?
Yeah, that's like creating this 100 west bike corridor. With the innovation spaces, Public Works did say they have no concerns about that because if they find a pilot project they'd like to do in this area, great, they'll do it. And if not, they're not going to.
And other people will
Identifying this as this could be a
find that
potential innovation space doesn't.
Yeah, that's true. It will
give
be
them any
confusing to the public.
residents,
what other
they can still choose with that.
Yeah, that is confusing to the public. I agree with that.
Yeah. So it's up to the council. Public Works was neutral on the first and in opposition to the second.
I think I'm in opposition to both. Okay, so you want two different motions?
If possible, just since those were formal recommended conditions from the planning commission, if I can just get an acknowledgement, thumbs up or thumbs down from council on whether to put them in the final document. That'd be good.
Okay, so I make a motion that we not approve the recommendations from the planning commission.
Well, so I can just say as noted in the ROs.
I'll second that.
They're in the ROAs, so feel free to reference those for the language. Yeah.
Okay, so we,
Boards can do innovation wherever they want in the city anytime. That's great.
Yeah.
They don't need to be.
It doesn't need to be in code, yeah.
so we have a motion from Councillor Bogdan with a second from Councillor McKay that the recommendations from the planning commission have been considered, but are not supported by this council. Those in favor, Councillor Whipple?
No. No, because I actually really like their first one. On the
Do you
looking
want to
at,
do them separately?
well, I don't know how the rest of the council feels, but
You could make a substitute motion to reject one and accept the other.
yeah, because I like the idea that if we tried out some of these things here in this zone where we've got.
Why the busy
incentive-
zone? Like they can do it anywhere. Like we don't need to tell Public Works they could do something. They can do an innovation thing wherever they want in the city.
Separate from the area plan.
Yeah, it's just less confusing to residents. That way we don't have residents coming and demanding things that maybe Public Works doesn't want to do.
Yeah.
Sorry, Becky, who'd you say, who would demand it?
Residents. I think that you would have, that's what, if I remember right, that's what got them in trouble the last time.
Yeah, so my vote is just no.
Okay, to not support the
I
motion.
do not support the motion, which is rejecting the planning commission's recommendation.
No to the no.
Probably could.
For Kevin.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Bogdan.
I'm gonna say yes.
Okay, Councillor McKay.
Yes.
Councillor Christensen.
Yes.
Councillor Garrett, yes. Councillor Hoban?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that motion passes by a vote of 5-1.
I'll see you on July 8th.
Okay, so one more
For
question.
affordable housing. Yeah,
Can you go back to 2230, Hannah?
of course.
And a broader question, first of all. So if these state mandated area plans are, once they're approved, is there any associated funding that's made available to carry out these plans? Or is this more what you refer to?
It's actually worse than that. Not only do we not get additional funding, although we have been told that
Money from us.
we can cite these goals in our grant applications to show that this is something we've been planning on, we're serious, we're committed, and we're going to be accountable to the state on its progress at multiple levels. But that's not a guarantee. Where the funding is not given, but we don't get it taken away, is that if the station area plans meet all the goals, they are counted as part of our moderate income housing plan goals to adopt station areas and address parking and transportation in these areas. And if we are committed to our goals and on track and meeting those, then we don't get docked priority funding status.
Priority of District 4 that was raised in their recent district meeting was this formal trail from Carterville Road.
Yeah, it's mentioned in it.
It is mentioned.
Yeah,
But we don't get any
different
grant for
chapters.
it.
They're not gonna help fund that.
But having it in there might help us get a grant or help.
Okay.
It's, you know, you never know.
Well,
Yeah,
I
we've
think-
mentioned the location justification and alternatives in 3 of the 5 chapters in the plan, just to make sure that it's really well cited. We can use it for grant stuff.
Okay.
Well, not only that, but if there's redevelopment in the area, they might, if they buy that property, then they'll have to put that in, I would think.
Okay.
Yeah, the property that owns, or the,
Well, if it's in the general master
That's not
plans,
owned.
generally,
it's an individual property, but it's too steep to develop. So
Yeah.
it doesn't have any development rights associated.
Yeah, it wouldn't be.
Well.
It would have.
Separate question, Hannah. As new UVX stations come online, like the
Yes.
one in 90s, will that also require an area plan?
If they have what's called a fixed guided railway system, where it's like built in the middle of the road and can never be moved
Okay.
just by moving a
Okay,
pavilion and a
that's
sign,
what's required.
then they have to have a station area plan before they can open.
I see.
If it's just a pull off on the side of the road, like we're seeing on
Which is
9th
what it
East,
is.
then we don't have to have a plan. And that's why we don't have to have plans for the other East Bay stations.
That's what it is.
Yep.
Great. Any other questions for Hannah?
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Hannah. We'll look forward to.
Nice job.
Yes. See you again.
Awesome.
All right, we'll now, if there's no objection, we'll adjourn the municipal council meeting by unanimous consent. Is there a closed session? No, okay.
No.
All right.
Recording stopped.